We're extremely sorry for the disconnection. So, hey, ladies and gentlemen, here Michelle, your today host for the conference. It's a great pleasure and an honor to welcome you all to the 5th Annual Clinical Trial Summit 2021. Thank you all for joining this virtual meeting, and I hope that every one of you enjoying the best of your health. Whether you're attending this event for the first time or you have been a part of our top-notch conferences before, I bet you that your experience at the Clinical Trial Summit 2021 will be worthwhile and productive. Our conferences have a great reputation among the delegates and suppliers as a must-attend event, and I hope that the highly focused business development opportunity through the Our conferences have a great reputation among the delegates and suppliers as a must-attend event. I hope that the highly focused business development opportunity through the cutting-edge conference programs and numerous networking opportunities will all contribute to a successful and enjoyable event for you. Before we initiate our conference, I would like to warmly welcome the representative and would like to introduce our speaker lineup for today, which includes Vladimir Nismo, Principal Data Scientist, Amazon. He will be sharing his sentiments on optimal designing, monitoring, and forecasting patient recruitment and events count. Then we have Cesar Spadoni, Chief Operating Officer, Oncology. He will be presenting on making oncology trials more exclusive for the younger patients. Then we have Maxim Simonov, Business Development Manager, Borswell. His thoughts will be on the fast LAN of ICH regulator update of clinical trial procedures and trends in China. Then we have Martin Trader, head of MDM business partner, Boehringer Ingelheim. He will be exploring on 7 policies around the data. Then we have Valentina John Weska, CEO, Vela Trials, Clinical Trials. Her topic will be changing the game with the decentralized clinical trials. Natalie Wilson, Business Development Manager, NIHR. Her topic is delivering decentralized trials in the UK. Last but not the least, we have Denise Stackle, Head of Clinical Collaboration Management, Genentech. She will be putting light on case study in working with collaborators. Tanya Sinosh, Director of Health Operation, GS1, she will be presenting on enabling the clinical trial supply chain with global standards. I hope we would learn new ideas from each other, which we could adopt to further improve our work in this important area. Our opening presenter for today's conference is Vladimir Nismo, who is working as a principal data scientist at Amazon. Hello, Vladimir, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Do you hear me?
Yeah, sure. We welcome you at the conference. Thank you so much for being a part of our conference. So let's get started. Kindly please share your screen.
Still host disabled. I cannot share.
So, okay. There is a button on the bottom, the green button. Share screen.
Yeah, but host disabled. It means I cannot share. I'm not allowed to do this.
Okay, please wait a second. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear.
Yeah, please try it again.
Oh, probably.
Okay, great. So ladies and gentlemen, here we have Vladimir Nismo, who is working as a principal data scientist at Amazon. So the stage and the audience is all yours now, Vladimir.
Yeah, hello, sorry. Well, so I will talk about rather important areas for all pharma companies and CRO working with large clinical trials, about innovative statistical technique for optimal design, monitoring, and forecasting patient recruitment and event counts. So you know that contemporary, oh, sorry, I will share screen just a second. Yeah, and this, yeah. You know that late-stage clinical trials involve really hundreds and thousands of patients to be recruited by many clinical sites in different countries. And to create this operational design of recruitment and especially monitoring over time is very complex because it's affected by various uncertainties. And also this design mainly driven by patient recruitment. And citing Ken Getz, director of TAF Center for Study of Drug Development in US, patient recruitment and retention are among the greatest challenges that the clinical research enterprises faces today. And they are the major cause of drug development delays. However, I need to mention that still many companies use ad hoc simplified or deterministic models. For example, in particular country, in particular months, 5 patients, 5 patients, 5 patients each month, so it's deterministic linear prediction. And of course, using the deterministic predictions, you cannot evaluate particular stochastic variables, for example, probability to complete in time. And also all this may lead to inefficient design, underpowered in delayed trials, extra costs, and drug waste. According to Tufts report, now it's about 23% of trials fail to recruit in time. But of course, better than in 2012, when they were 50%. And I will talk about different directions. First, about advanced models for forecasting patient recruitment and also optimal designing, accounting for different constraints. Then at interim stage, using data-driven reforecasting and optimal adjustment to maximize recruitment predictability. Another area, this is centralized statistical monitoring and forecasting trial performance. And also related area, it's predicting event counts in event-driven trials. For recruitment modeling, of course, we need to use quite advanced sophisticated methodology, which can realistically predict real trials. And clinical sites are, of course, different. Patients arrive non-deterministically, and we assume that patients arrive independently of each other, not by groups, more or less homogeneously over time. And this is stochastic Poisson flows in different sites. And because sites are different, rates in different sites are modeled using a gamma distribution. And also, definitely, sites are initiated at different times with uncertain initiation times. For this type of assumptions and for this model, which is known Poisson gamma model, we developed closed form expressions for the main predictive characteristics. So there is no need really in Monte Carlo simulation. And this methodology, worldwide accepted, published in top statistical journals, and also presented at major conferences. And the basic paper in Statistics in Medicine in 2007 now reached 131 Google Scholar citations. Developed methodology and related software tools in R allow the following main features. First, it is possible to predict recruitment over time with mean and predictive bounds, and I will show how it is working, and correspondingly predict time to reach recruitment target and probability of success at different stages. Specifically, I would like to mention initial stage, when we want to predict new trial and we don't know actually and don't have data about this new trial. The main question actually also for all pharma companies, how to predict recruitment rates for future trials or new trials. And in data science team, Amgen, we use quite sophisticated machine learning algorithms trained on large databases of historical studies using recently created, maybe several years ago, large consortium of pharma companies. Now there are 15 members, which allow different companies to use historical databases. And we use different features, trying to find historical studies similar in some sense to future studies, based on, of course, study indication, different types of sites, country, regions, number of sites, etc. And this is how initial recruitment of prediction at initial stage is working. So this is some initial design, actually, for realistic study. Sites are initiated with 5 months period, according to some schedule. 222 patient target. And this is prediction with mean, median, and 90% bounds of recruitment in this study. And we see that when this predictive area crosses target, we have predictive interval to stop recruitment. Here it's quite large, actually, around 375, 646 days. Quite large, but this is realistic. This is probability of success, probability to reach this target at any time point. For example, if you have planned time 15 months, at this point, we see that probability of success is only 0.365. Not that large. That means potentially we should think and improve this initial design to get larger probability of success. Similar predictions can be created also on country levels using newly developed analytic approximation recently published. And also recently we developed another newly developed analytic methodology for accounting for quite realistic cases when in different countries it can be restrictions on enrollment. We call it cap. For example, if in some country cap is 50 patients, that means recruitment in this country will stop when 50 patients are reached. And the left part is predicting recruitment accounting for initial caps. And we see that over time, in some countries, caps were reached. And that means recruitment is slowed down in these countries, actually stopped. And global recruitment is slowing down. Right part, we increased initial caps on 30%. So we see that practically there is no impact of caps now. So conclusion is that if we use non-efficient, rather low caps, this may significantly increase recruitment time. Here it's about 2.5 months on average. Next, quite important area, optimal design of recruitment at the initial stage. And key questions here are, first, how to increase predictability of recruitment, and which countries and how many sites to select that can recruit the fastest with the minimal cost to get a desired probability of success. And first, develop tools allow to realize a completely new paradigm in planning recruitment. Plan with confidence. That means it is possible to design a trial with 80% chance to complete recruitment in time. Correspondingly, if we evaluate probability of success and for particular scenario, and it's not that large, then study is likely to go late, and we can evaluate a minimal number of additional sites needed to reach a desired probability of success. It can be formulated, this problem, in the following way. Find an optimal geographic site allocation among J countries, so N1, N2, etc., number of sites in different countries. So optimal number of sites that minimizes total trial cost, given that probability to complete in time should be at least that particular planned probability, for example, 80%. And of course, it can be restrictions on recruitment, caps, and also it should be restrictions on the number of sites and countries. For example, not more than 2 sites, not less than 2 sites, and not more than 10 sites in particular countries. Trial cost is quite wide. It can include costs per site initiation, countries, patients, monitoring, etc. And definitely, if you want to complete recruitment earlier, it will cost more. And this is another story, really, because we provide different solutions for different scenarios. And another story, really, which scenarios to choose, where to invest more money, and combine time and cost. And to solve this problem, we developed analytical tools and also a package using different criteria of optimality. This is nonlinear constraint optimization, modern genetic evolution algorithms, different metaheuristic optimization. Next stage, this is data-driven reprojection and adaptive adjustment of recruitment at interim stage. Now we have real data, and actually data are quite simple. In active site, we need to know recruitment window and number of patients recruited, and also number of new sites if some sites should be initiated in the future. Then using this data, we can estimate parameters of the model, re-estimate or adjust in different sites posterior rates using data and Bayesian re-estimation. And then future recruitment can be predicted using posterior rates in active sites and also expected rates in the new sites. And again, if probability, which can be evaluated, probability of success is not so large, then it can be calculated the number of additional sites that we need to add to complete in time with a given probability. And this is artificial but quite illustrative scenario showing how really this is working in practice. So assume that we have some initial scenario of site initiation during some particular period. This is prediction with 90% bounds, and the design was created such that probability to recruit before 1 year is 90%, because predictive interval is to the left of 1 year. And assume now that real enrollment after 5 months is going lower, and clearly we see if to predict it further, it will go after 1 year. So trial will be delayed. Now at this point, it is possible to re-estimate how many additional sites we need to add to return on track. And it can be calculated that if you add 5 sites each month, then it should be added 22 new sites. And in this case, recruitment will return on track and complete with 90% confidence. Also, another very important area, which is quite popular now, contemporary area, centralized statistical monitoring, or it is called sometimes risk-based monitoring. That means we need constantly monitor how recruitment is going and detect unusual data patterns with the purpose to make informed decision and signal clinical teams. The developed methodologies allow to detect, this is specifically for recruitment, low and high recruiting sites, country and regions, and also low active and dormant sites. And it can be used different types of detection or visualization. For example, upper p-values for high recruiting sites, low p-values to detect low enrolling sites, or 2D classification visual. This is real trial. So here we have data for every site, enrollment window, and number of patients enrolled here. But on this plot, we calculate for every site 2 values, upper and low p-value, upper red, low blue. And this is minus log scale. That means if these values are quite large, original p-values are very small. So here we have red dots corresponding to 6 sites, which are very highly enrolling, because here division line, separation line is 5%. So p-values here less than 5%. Correspondingly, one site in blue, that means low p-value, is very small. This site is low enrolling, unusually. And same classification for the same study can be done really visually in natural scale enrollment window number of patients enrolled. Here we have for one site this natural data. And again, we see this is separation lines, upper and low quantiles for Poisson gamma model, dots over upper quantile corresponding to highly enrolling sites, below low enrolling or low recruited. Again, we see the same 6 sites as here, which are highly enrolling. And same classification can be done also on country and region level. For other metrics, it also can be developed different techniques. For example, for forecasting future recruitment performance on different levels. And I will show how it is working. Also, as interim assessment of other processes like screen failures, dropout, adverse events. Also, predicting dynamic behaviors in different regions on some operational characteristics. For example, predicting the number of non-recruiting, highly performing sites in particular regions. As this is quite interesting and a table for clinical sites, which is showing predicting future site recruitment performance. So this is different sites with real data, recruitment window, number of patients recruited in each site. Then future prediction is constructing using this data, parameters of model and Bayesian re-estimation, which allows to calculate probabilities. First, probability 0 not to recruit any patient in this site in the next 1 month. And this column, not to recruit not more than 2 patients in the next 3 months in this site. So we see that for some sites, probability not to recruit is quite large, more than 80%. Well, it's more or less clear because recruitment window is rather large, but small number of patients recruited, this is in the past, correspondingly predicting in future should reflect this behavior definitely. And then it's easy to detect sites which are not so good recruiting in the future according to, say, some particular threshold, say 80%, and this is tool to alert study teams. Just to know the technique is analytic because Monte Carlo simulation would really require a huge number of runs to create this scenario. It's interesting also to note that using advanced recruitment model allows to explain a large differences of site productivity in studies where we have not so large recruitment rates, for example, oncology. And people who working with large databases know that in large studies, it can be about 20–30% of sites empty at the end, recruited 0 patients. And also, if you consider impact of the most productive sites, about 20–25% of them recruit half of all patients, and about half of most productive sites recruit 80% of all patients. And it's indeed not the result of inefficient planning, but this is really statistical law, which is based on really this model and based also on, because of rates in different sites are very different. And this is confirmed by empirical analysis of many trial databases. And this, I would say, really amazing picture. This is a real trial. Red, this is theoretical curve, and blue empirical curve, showing the proportions or impact of the most highly productive sites into total number of patients recruited here at the end. And we see here that half of all patients recruited by about 22% of the most productive sites, and 80% 80% of patients recruited by about half of all of the most productive sites. Well, and this is more or less typical picture and the typical behavior for large clinical trials. A few last slides I would like to devote to description of more complicated operational processes which are driven by patient recruitment. For example, in oncology, explanation can be the following: that each recruited patient, upon randomization, actually generates some follow-up process with random lifetime. It can be follow-up visits, related events, associated costs, again with visits, maintenance, etc. And it actually is quite sophisticated hierarchical constructions, because we see recruitment of patients, and with every patient we associate additional process like follow-up process related to some events, etc. Evolution of these follow-up processes can be called a hierarchic evolving process. And also closed form solutions are derived from many practical scenarios. And actually each scenario may be really considered as a special talk, really, to describe in details what can be done. And I will talk only here about predicting events in event-driven trials. Mainly these results are published, but not fully. So let us consider the final topic. What does it mean, event-driven trial? Event-driven trials means, like oncology and cardiovascular, that patients are recruited and follow up until clinical events. And actually the main task of the trial, not to recruit particular patient sample size, but reach particular sample size for events, to make particular conclusions about influence of drug. In this model, actually we have, as usual, some recruitment stage, and with the purpose to recruit particular number of patients. And during this recruitment stage, patients are recruited, events appearing, and then usually when recruitment is stopped, there are some number of patients at risk waiting for events, and its going follow-up stage can be quite long to reach a particular number of events. So we assume that recruitment follows a Poisson gamma model, and each patient can experience main event and dropout. And also we assume it's quite new really model that each patient can be also cured with some probability. And for enrollment, for events, we assume that it can be exponential, variable, and log normal models for time to event and time to dropout. And in this way, it was developed also analytical methodology. And important is that it allows to predicting events accounting for ongoing recruitment. Because at some point, for example, if recruitment is not stopped, then it is necessary to predict not only events which will happen for patients already at risk, but also predict events for patients that will be recruited in the future. Well, and this is really additional piece which is quite complicated, and for this it was developed quite innovative methodology. And predictive characteristics here also derived in the closed form. Partly these results are published, and this is a final slide to show how it is working in reality. So this is retrospective analysis, historical trial, and of course this is used for validation of the model, because we consider historical trials at some particular interim time, estimate parameters, create predictions, and then check how these predictions correspond to real trajectory of events in the past. So this we can see here that at this point they were estimated parameters of recruitment events, created predictions, mean and bounds. And this now is a real trajectory of events, which we see fit very well to predictive area. And for this tool, for this prediction events together with recruitment, we developed in the data science team a package event prediction. So in conclusions, I would like to say that we developed really advanced analytic techniques which can perform sometimes really, I would say, fantastic opportunities for predicting recruitment at different stages, optimal designing, then centralized statistical monitoring, also predicting future recruitment performance and event counts. And these developed tools have a huge potential. They are used now in our team in Amgen, huge potential for improving the efficiency and maximizing clinical trials and more enrollment predictability and trial operational design. There are some publications. I am finishing here. Thank you for your attention. Hello?
Well, thank you, Vladimir, for your perceptive presentation, and we are really honored to have you at conference. I will request the audience to ask any question about his presentation in the QA session. Vladimir, please answer them in the QA session. Thank you so much.
Yes, I see one question. Do you use therapeutic or indication-specific parameters for your predictive models, or
Yes,
example status of pandemic, whatever? Thank you. Yes,
you can answer them
question.
there.
Yes, yeah. Yes.
Sure.
First, about the specific therapeutic areas for predictive model. For recruitment, there is no therapeutic or indication. Oh, hello, do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, because I was muted. Okay, so there is no, we do not use really specific indication for predict recruitment, because this is general technology, methodology for any trials, oncology, cardiovascular, disease, etc. Of course, for predicting events, this technique is oriented to event-driven trials. So, of course, this is for oncology and cardiovascular. I do not have specific example for COVID because really we have very rapidly decreasing enrollment, but we have some other models to check how enrollment is going, checking recruitment rates, homogeneity of rates, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So moving on to our next presenter is Cesar Spadoni, who is working as a Chief Operating Officer at Oncology. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cesar Spadoni. Hello, Cesar, how are you?
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good. So I can start sharing my screen,
yes,
right?
Yes, please start sharing your screen so that we start the presentation.
Okay, very good. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, so you can start the presentation now. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the invitation to present today. So what I would like to present today, just to give a sort of high-level overview of what our company does, but more importantly about the challenges of running oncology trials for younger patients, and ways in which we could include younger patient, adolescents into adult trials, and why this makes sense for not just for patients, but also for companies running these trials. First of all, I'd like to give you a very brief overview of OncoHeroes Biosciences, the company that I co-founded a few years ago. We are a Boston-based company, and our focus is on pediatric oncology drug development. We want to develop drugs specifically for cancer that are affecting children and adolescents. And we have a headquarters in Boston, and we have a drug discovery lab in Europe, in Barcelona. So our plan is really to build a pipeline of product, pipeline of opportunities. With our drug discovery lab, we're generating our own IP. We are producing drug candidates that we hope to move to the clinic as quickly as possible. And in parallel, we are in-licensing candidates from academia or from pharma industry, and we are taking them through clinical development. Really, the goal of the company is to become a worldwide leader in pediatric oncology, but also we want to become a partner of choice for biotech pharma companies that have interesting project in the oncology space, and they may benefit from a co-development partner in pediatric oncology. And also we're attracting a lot of investment from parents, organizations, foundations. So this is really on a high level, a description of what we do and why we are interested in pediatric oncology. Apart from the mission-driven aspect of the company, we think there's a high unmet medical need in pediatric oncology. Cancer in children and adolescents may be rare, but even if it's rare, more than 9,000 patients die every year of cancer. Every 3 minutes, a child is diagnosed with cancer throughout the world as we speak. And cancer is the major cause of death by disease for children in Europe and North America. And one of the key features is that cancers affecting children and adolescents are different diseases. They're not the same cancers occurring in adults. And you have a higher percentage of certain types of leukemias, and of course, brain cancers, which are relatively more frequent in children and adolescents. And all a range of cancers that are really not so much frequent in adults, like sarcomas, but they are definitely more relevant in children. So this is one challenge. As you can imagine, industry is definitely focused on developing drugs for major adult indications. Then, pharma companies and biotech are not so much focused on developing specific drugs for pediatric cancer. And as a result, over the past 30 years, we had more than 200 drugs developed specifically for adult cancers, but only 4 drugs specifically developed and approved for cancer in children. And one consequence of this is that basically we haven't seen a huge improvement of the past 20, 30 years in cancer, in survival rates. We have seen some improvements in some high-risk cancer, for example, high-risk neuroblastoma, but again, it means that survival rates went up to 40%. So more than 50% of the patients will die of the disease. We haven't seen an improvement in medulloblastoma, type of brain cancer, and it's appallingly 1% of basically no survival chances for patients with high-grade glioma like DIPG or diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. So clearly there's a strong need for the development of better drugs for kids with cancer. And here we have 2 possible pathways. One pathway is that the development of specific drugs for children, for those specific cancer. And here we have different incentives like the orphan drug incentives, the incentives given by the priority review voucher, but also we have the sort of hybrid situations. There are molecules that are developed for adult cancer indication, and they may have a potential indication in children cancer as well. And these are regulated by FDA and EMA regulation that mandates the development of specific clinical trials for children, or for example, more recently, the RACE Act, where even though that specific cancer is not occurring in the pediatric populations, FDA may require pediatric studies if the mechanism of action is relevant for children. So even companies that are not particularly interested in pediatric oncology may have to run pediatric trials in oncology. And so the issue is complicated by the fact when you think about pediatrics, we think about all patients that are below 18, but within this time frame, clearly we have different populations, subpopulations. We have infants, toddlers, and children and teens. And if you think about some 15 years old, can be considered adults from the physiological point of view. However, from the legal point of view and from the sort of drug development perspective, they will still be considered as pediatrics. And the interesting aspect of the regulation is that these pediatric obligations may be waived. This is the case in Europe, but it's a similar case in the US where, you know, the drug, if the drug can be harmful for children, if it's clear that the drug is unlikely to give any benefits over existing treatment, or if it's a specific disease only. So again, things are changing now because of the molecular aspect of this. So because of the same mechanisms of action, maybe companies may be forced. But the point is that in some cases, there's no requirement for pediatric studies. But there are documented cases where pediatric studies were requested for the same disease that's occurring in adults and younger patients, but in the younger patient population, it's very rare. So it begs the question whether these trials are really needed for this specific patient population. And I think I want to give a couple of examples. One is melanoma. Melanoma is kind of evenly distributed across all age group, although there's a clear peak above 60 years of age. And if you look at this graph, you can see the number of adolescents or children basically being affected by melanoma is really very small. So the question is, should a pediatric trial in melanoma go ahead? Is there a rationale for this? Well, apparently there was a rationale because at least according to EMA, EMA mandated the trial of this drug, vemurafenib, which is a BRAF inhibitor, which was approved in 2012 for adults. And the EMA requested a pediatric investigation plan, so requested the company to open pediatric trials and basically run these trials. Now, this was really challenging because there are not enough patients. There were, several trials open across the world of 4 continents, and 3 years later, only 6 patients have been recruited. So clearly, there was no response and the study had to be closed again. So this was a regulatory request that didn't make sense, or basically was a request for a trial that was not feasible. The other example is Hodgkin lymphoma. Again, this is more evenly distributed, but again, you may argue that the number of patients below 18 is still very tiny, so trial may be unfeasible. But again, EMA requested a pediatric trial for Hodgkin lymphoma. And the interesting thing is that this was a trial for brentuximab vedotin, which is an antibody-drug conjugate. It was approved for adult use in 2012, and pediatric studies were after approval were started, and went on for a number of years. But they went on for a number of years for brentuximab vedotin as a single agent, while basically the data gathered in adults was basically indicating that this antibody-drug conjugate should be used in combination. So again, there was like a disconnect between the regulatory requirements and the need of patients, where data were being generated, but they were already outdated on the basis of the results that were gathered for adults. Again, did it make any sense to start a pediatric trial, or should these patients have been included in the adult trial if possible? So there was clearly some, there were studies, where they analyzed these situations, and there was a famous study a few years ago with Professor Whelan in the UK, where they found only 6 out of 49 studies in cancer common to teenagers and adults at appropriate age eligibility criteria. So clearly the problem from a patient perspective is that adolescents are denied early access to potentially life-saving drugs. They could join the adult trials, but instead we relegate adolescents to pediatric trials that are either unfeasible or they're too difficult to run, or they don't make sense, so they come too late. So this is really the challenge from a patient perspective. From a physiological point of view, there's no really clear difference. I mean, we're talking about infants, toddlers, they may have different physiological parameters, but past the age of 12, everything really can be considered comparable to adults' data. So there's no clear medical scientific rationale for having a clear-cut age limit of 18. And again, so there are different diseases. Again, it depends on the specific disease. There are diseases that are specific for the younger patient population, children, adolescents, like diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, and real other diseases like Ewing sarcoma, where the distribution is really peaking around adolescents. And really, this is really the key question for Ewing sarcoma. Should we run adult trials, or should we run pediatric trials, or should we run trials for all ages on the basis of molecular markers? Again, is this pediatric versus adult sort of a difference, something that makes sense, or is it just a legal significance, but doesn't have a medical physiological significance? So we think that common sense should prevail here, and we should be more flexible. So I'm part of a working group, which is part of the Accelerate platform, this multi-stakeholder conference, where it's an annual gathering of academics, industry partners, patients, parents, association, and regulators. And this working group called Foster Age Inclusive Research group, so it's FAIR working group. It's really about raise awareness and challenge the dogma, this sharp gap between pediatric and adult studies, and define requirements whereby adolescent, younger patient could join adult trials and basically could have access to these drugs in a more timely fashion. We call for changes to standard procedure, and we want to influence decision makers in this process. The output of the working group was a paper that we published 3 years ago, and where we basically explained our recommendations. We explained why it makes sense to make oncology trial more inclusive and include adolescent. Clearly, we think that there is a strong rationale for including adolescents above the age of 12 into adult trials. If there's a scientific rationale, there are no particular medical concerns. One important aspect, though, is that adolescents should be treated in age-appropriate settings, ideally in pediatric ward. And we would benefit, the timed enrollment should benefit from early adult PK data that may be already gathered, from previous studies. But also it's important that young adults may be enrolled into pediatric trials, particularly the example of a Ewing sarcoma, when basically the bulk of the population is adolescents. It doesn't make any sense. We could run pediatric trials and include young adults as well. There should be more flexibility in the way we run trials. We think there's no particular safety toxicity risk. This is compatible with law and pediatric regulation. There's nothing in the pediatric medicine regulation that prevents the inclusion of adolescents into adult trials. We don't find any evidence of harm to younger patients. Quite the contrary, we make innovative new treatments more promptly available to younger patients. And there's no evidence that these delays or jeopardizes adult trials. And the other aspect is that it provides an advantage to companies running these trials, because in this way, they may not need to run separate pediatric trials, but they could just basically expand the existing adult trials. I mean, this is just a quotation that I collected over the years. I mean, I think there seems to be a strong consensus, from industry, from people within the clinical community, pharma representative, and so very often, it's really the mindset we need to change, and sort of break barriers and understand we can do things in different ways. and that's this would make a lot of sense. So we have also regulatory support. There was a FDA guidance a couple of years ago. EMA just issued a practical guidance for industry in support of clinical trials, more inclusive clinical trials, and IFU-GCP, this industry network also basically share, documents in support of this. So what we are doing within the working group is to prepare this so-called AYA, the Adolescent Young Adult Toolkit. We want to provide a toolkit, a set of information for companies that are willing to make clinical trials more inclusive, just really to provide guidance, provide information on the regulatory aspects, protocol elements, and all the practical tools, a list of relevant trials, but also clinical sites that may be well equipped to run these type of trials. And this is something that can be, it's freely available, can be accessed. People can either contact me or go on the website that I will give later. Another important thing is the so-called AYA stamp. We want to really commend the trial that are more inclusive. This has no value other than PR value. We're just basically congratulating the companies that really can create more, can set up more inclusive pediatric oncology trials, expanding to adolescents. And these are 3 examples that we know of trials that got this stamp. And again, I should stress this has no value other than PR and really make these trials, put this trial in the spotlight, in a good light, as viewed by parents associations and other organizations. So there are a number of hurdles that we are aware, and when we suggest changes, there are always challenges and hurdles. And this is sort of some of the questions that we put together. We also prepared the questionnaire for industry and academia so another organization that we like to share with them to hear their views. So some of probably the biggest challenge is just to make sure that the trial are run in sites that have also pediatric wards, that have also pediatric oncology investigators, and this is not always easy. It's possible in bigger centers, but it may not be possible in every hospital. But we have evidence that these can be worked out, and I think the other thing is the operational from point of view is that it's really beneficial for companies that are running these trials, because it may avoid the need to have separate pediatric trials. With the RACE Act, for example, we are talking to a lot of companies that are developing something for adult indications, and they are asked by the FDA to run also pediatric trials to expand the use of the drug to younger patients. By having a more inclusive trial, including younger patients, they may avoid this need to set up a separate trial. So this is one thing that's really very important to consider. And this is really the website of the FAIR working group. Please feel free to email me if you have any question. I can put you in touch with the right persons, and feel free. I think you probably get a copy of this presentation because I think it should be shared by the organizers. And essentially, if you get on the website, you get more information. But I'll be more than happy to provide more information for anybody that contacts me directly. And again, as OncoHeroes, we are interested in co-development. If any company out there, has some interesting asset and would like to explore the possibility of running trials, including younger patient or setting up specific pediatric trials, we'll be happy to collaborate with them. And I think I'm at the end of my presentation. I just want to make sure that I stay within my allocated time, so I'll be happy to take questions.
Yes. Well, thank you, Cesar, for your stimulating presentation. You have touched so many critical points, and we hope you will be with us again. I will request the audience to ask any question regarding his presentation in QA session, and Cesar, you can answer them there. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Okay.
Moving on to our next presenter, Maximum Simnov, Business Development Manager, Proswell. He will be sharing his views on the fast lane of ICH regulatory update of clinical trial procedures and trends in China. He will be with us within few minutes. Stay connected. Thank you.
Hi, this is Ying Shuwen from Proswell. Actually, Max is waiting for your switch. Yeah. Okay, now it's good. Yes.
Oh, yes, I was unmuted, yes. It's now working well. Well, can I start? Well, does everyone see me very well now? No?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Hi,
you.
Maxim. How are you?
Yeah. Well, I'm fine, yes.
Yeah, you can start the presentation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, my name is Max. I'm representing Proswell Medical Company, the full-service clinical trial CRO company in China. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Wherever you are in the world, thanks for your time. And yes, let's begin. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our plan for today's meeting includes analysis of growing China pharmaceutical market, current situation around clinical trial industry in China, recent regulation updates from an MPA, key successful factors of clinical trial in China based on our company experience and introduction of our company and our achievements. Then we will answer all questions you may have. Medicine spending in China has risen from 36 billion in 2010 to 134 billion in 2020. Over the past 5 years, spending growth was driven by original branded products. Most of them are from multinational companies, which part augmented an average of 12% per year, up from 20% during the last 5 years. The next 5 years, the government policies regulating the National Reimbursement Drug List, NRDL, will result higher level medicine spending due to new innovation medication reimbursements. According to the prognosis, original brands will be growing by more than 9% per year. So 2025 China market should exceed 170 billion for 5 years in total, or around 50 billion each year. So medicine spending growth in China is expected to accelerate post-COVID recovery, driven by greater involvement and use of new original medicines. Let us look at top 10 countries and healthcare expenses rated. As we can see, China has moved from third position to the second, right behind the US. After 2015 and with stable augmentation, it is expected to be 29% of US market size. The two world's biggest therapeutic areas, oncology and immunology, are expected to give a growth from 9% to 12% CAGR to the 2025. Except oncology and immunology, such types of chronic diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, neurological disorders, and respiratory diseases will also demonstrate financial spending increments. Unfortunately, China leading in cancer-related disease cases among all countries. Please take a look at the diagram. I would like to emphasize we are talking about newly registered cases during 2020. This group of patients, a very loud voice we can't ignore. This slide is very interesting. We can analyze the disease distribution among the age groups. Conclusion is as follows. Aging people population increasing, and chronic disease market has real potential for investment. China has huge population, and this fact, together with other chronic disease situation, results in the rising of big number of medical demands. This page reflects the changes of clinical trial number conducted in China during the last 12 years. The permanent growth and grant increments starting from 2015 are observed during this period of time. Let's see how it was distributed among phases. Phase distribution for the last decade. We can see the increment of bioequivalence at early time, but then we have seen the increased number of innovative medicine clinical trials. What is really interesting is new IND approvals for innovative drugs. The 2020 number of approvals compared to 2017 almost doubled. An MPA creates a very friendly environment for innovators. But about this topic, we will talk a little bit later. Here we can see the local trials compared to the MRCT conducted in China for each year. The percentage of international trials is pretty low, but demonstrate positive dynamic. That in turn is telling us about broad range of opportunities foreign sponsors can discover in China for their trial. Yes, let's move to the trial environment and resources. We saw the market potential in China. Now let us analyze current situation and local resources in clinical trial sector in China. The total number of registered clinical trial sites and its increment on the yearly base reflects the clinical trial sector development and big opportunities. From 2019, December 1st, sites do not need accreditation from regulatory agency, so the number of sites will continue to increase. Until the end of December, our 20,000 qualified investigators were registered in regulatory agency database to conduct clinical trial in different therapeutic areas. As we can see, oncology still remains the sector that has the biggest number of registered investigators in China. The number of leading primary investigators is 1,300. 10% of them have participated in the international MRCT trials. Yes, after resources and investigators, we move to the patient enrollment. Easy enrollment. Patient enrollment for clinical trials sometimes is the most difficult step during clinical study. In China, actually, government actively promotes encouragement policies for innovative drugs. At the same time, for most of the patients, this is the chance to receive breakthrough therapy because this is for free. So, many patients would like to join study to save their health or even their life. Communities. In China, patients belong to the special medical group where they get to know about upcoming trials and treatment opportunities. Regulatory update. NMPA, aka Chinese FDA or EMEA, has several departments and institutions with different responsibilities. Let's take a look at a glance at what they're doing. First one, CDE. CDE is responsible for dossier technical review and drug registration. CMD is a Center for Medical Device Evaluation. The NIFDC in duties and responsibilities can be described as laboratory testing for registration purpose, specification verification, commercial lot release. CFDI general responsibilities includes GLP, GMP, GCP inspections. In case of CPC, we should mention quality specification and generic name confirmation. CDR. CDR is doing adverse reaction monitoring and evaluation of drug development and post-marketing. Kind of regulatory environment development. Let's take a look briefly at what's happened during recent years. From 2015, State Council initiated regulatory system reform to encourage innovation and optimize review and approval process. After China joining ICH in 2017, the policy principles were materialized into laws, regulations, and guidelines. 2019 is new DAL, 2020 is new DRR. Exactly these things are standing behind the China's successful progress in marketing of the innovations. Regulatory rules and different levels of administrations are displayed here and includes from top level National People Congress, the State Council, National Medical Product Administration, Center for Drug Evaluation, New Drug Regulation, and new GCP, GMP, GVP guidelines were implemented recently. If you want to register medicine in China, you have to follow DRR, aka Drug Registration Regulation, with all its guidance. What has latest reform brought to us? Mainly we can see 4 directions, which are review and approval procedure optimization, innovation development encouragement, high quality management through life cycle, and full integration with global regulatory environment. I will explain some key points starting from the next page. What we have mentioned just right now had the practical results. Just take a look how long it was to get CTA before. Now it is about 60 working days. If during these 60 days we had not received any negative feedback from regulatory agencies, we can start to conduct the trial with the proposed protocol. At the same time, some of sites accept parallel ethical committee review during CTA application procedure. Finally, we do not need MCP accreditation for each site that also had consumed a lot of time before. The past and the nowadays. Compared to the previous approval process, we have exact timeline and corresponding approval can be begun at the same time. Inspection are completed within 40 days before review ends. If you are not going to change the manufacturing procedure, you even can apply sample quality testing before NDA BLA application. But if it has been changed, it should be applied again. Technical review and regulatory review time is 200 days, and priority review is 130 days. We just benchmarked 2020 results for important drugs. The approval time for regular review is 16-20 months, and priority review 10-13 months. Compared to the previous time, with 3 years of approval, now it has been shortened a lot. Well, what is a new drug? We have mentioned China is encouraging new drug development, and I have to make clear definition of the term the new drug. Actually, new drug means world new instead of China new, and there are two types of new drugs. First, innovative new drug is new compound with clinical value have never been registered anywhere in the world. The second one, improved new drug, is a medicine with new indication, new dosage formation, new route of administration, also not to be registered in China or in any other country before. Regulatory authority communication is only a separate chapter. It looks similar to FDA communication meetings. The purpose is to discuss key aspects of innovative drug development and work together to solve difficulties during research and development and problems not covered by technical guidelines. Currently, the communication is free of charge. Actually, it helps to understand requirements and to avoid the negative cases in the future. We suggest to have communication meeting in each development stage, and for pre-NDA BLA meeting, it's nearly compulsory. Met medical use approvals, just similar to FDA. Breakthrough therapy designation can be granted to any new drug with proven in clinical trials significant clinical value and dedicated to prevention or treatment of severe life-threatening or impacting life quality diseases, urgently needed for disease treatment without alternative or having adverse. The breakthrough therapeutic drug application benefits are priority in communication and consultancy with CDE during trial process. That will shorten the time. Conditional approval. Conditional approval can be achieved for drugs with confirmed efficacy and predicted clinical value for treatment of life-threatening diseases. Drugs meeting urgent healthcare needs and vaccines for emergency needs during outbreaks are accredited by National Public Health Committee of China after benefit-risk ratio evaluation. For conditional improvement, it is necessary to complete post-marketing commitment during the specified period of time and to take the risk management, of course. Priority review. Priority review for innovations is for innovative or improved new drugs, which are able to cover medical urgent needs or designated for prevention and treatment of important public threatening contagious diseases, rare diseases, new pediatric drugs, new formulation and specifications, vaccines or innovations during healthcare emergency. The priority review application could be submitted together with NDA application after CDE agreement during pre-NDA meeting. So pre-NDA meeting is compulsory in this case. Special review process is the situation when severe outbreak happen. Any medicine past special review process may be limited in use within the time and indications based on disease control needs. Well, now more simple. This diagram makes it easier to understand what we have discussed just a minute ago and at which step each procedure could be done. The system works. It helps innovations reach the patients faster in China. The provided data is proving what I'm saying, especially the increased percentage of priority reviews among NDA approvals demonstrated that. Now let's focus on drug intellectual property in China. This is also very important part. There are patent linkage and patent compensation, which will be implemented from June 1st, 2021. Patent compensation. After approval, patent term extension is 5 years and means these additional 5 years. This is compensation of time spent for review and clinical development. But from approval to the patent expiration there should be no more than 14 years. In draft regulations, which probably will be implemented next year, orphan drug and pediatric drug protection are 6 years. For new chemical drug, the protection period is also 6 years. Biological product has 12 years. Well, many sponsors asking about acceptance of overseas data from other clinical trials conducted outside of the country. Regarding overseas data, CDE already released guidance for this case. It is possible to apply NDA directly if global data demonstrate safety and efficacy and considered as reliable, and there is no any ethnic difference, so the drug could be exempted from clinical trials. There are 4 key parameters to judge could the data be accepted. First, healthcare needs in China, current safety and efficacy data quality, no ethnic difference data, and risk-benefit evaluation results. And already joined ICH GCPs. So after China joining ICH, regulatory authorities accelerated the conversion of ICH guidelines. Up to now, most of guidelines were already translated and integrated into practice, but some guidelines, some regulations still contain China-specific requirements, and new guidance are always being released and updated. Again, we compare what has been before and what we have now. Before joining ICH, it was necessary to wait the overseas CPP, but now regulatory authorities highly encourage early involvement of global development, given opportunity to join global MRCT trials from early phase and with no NDA timing restriction. As the second largest market with improved regulatory environment, China becomes more and more attractive now. Despite the clinical trial process, it is well regulated nowadays. But it is still quite tricky to conduct the study smoothly and successfully. So we'll discuss key successful factors of trials in China. You should know which medicine is in demand in China, which drug could be considered as unique tool for severe disease treatment, what time is good for application. Now the regulations become more and more friendly and clearly identify the rules and opportunities in clinical sector for newcomers. Correct time means now with us. Each medicine has its own unique situation, and the distinct regulatory policy could be chosen to benefit from new legislation for several drug types and classes. Selecting correct partner is most important for successful trial in China. We always update our knowledge about new regulations and deliver it like useful tool to our partner. We know how to do. Correct communication with authorities supposes in-depth knowledge of procedures and application rules. We are a personal medical company, creating global CRO in China, the full service CRO. As I mentioned, we are providing full range of global CRO service for innovative drugs to make it easier for right medicine to reach the right patient. Mostly we have gained experience in such fields as oncology, neurology, immunology, ophthalmology, dermatology, chronic diseases, and vaccine trials. We have successfully managed local trials as well as international multi-center trials. Our history. For 16 years of experience, we keep professional attitude to what we are doing. Company was founded in 2004. We always paying close attention to our quality management systems, evaluating and updating it on a regular basis, and obtaining the quality certificates undergone in audits. From 2017, we entered in so-called risk-based management system. Thanks to our professional attitude and excellent work we had done, since 2013, Chinese government started to interest in the government projects. First innovative drug approval we got in 2015, at the same time with our launching pharmacovigilance service. In 2018, we have established the Japan office to facilitate our communication with overseas sponsors. In 2020, we have partnered with the biggest in Asia imaging service company. This is our service scope. We are providing the full spectrum of service for our partner, including, but not limited, all of these mentioned procedures from early stage consulting, clinical development plan, due diligence, up to regulatory affairs, clinical monitoring, as well as medical monitoring, project management, and subject recruitment, data management, statistical analysis, audit services. We are a one-stop solution provider. Our achievements at a glance. Total, we have carried more than 400 clinical trial sites, managed 500 projects from A to Z by ourselves. We experience in more than 10 therapeutic areas. We have recruited about 80,000 subjects. Here, the medicine we got improved in recent years for local and foreign sponsors. As you can see, every year we manage an innovative drug clinical trial project with successful results. That means all of these innovations are surely reaching their patients. This is our formula of success: integration and stability of all elements during the work process. Take a look at our project experience during the last 16 years, please. Due to these advantages, we were able to successfully complete so many projects. I repeat once again, utilizing our own resources only. Particularly, our oncology background is represented here. Types, targets, phase distribution. We have rich experience in diverse oncology projects. We have conducted trials for all widely used and latest types of MOD, and most of them are innovative drugs. Well, let's see who are our team. Our medical affairs team are presented by more than 20 professionals, most of them with doctor background from different therapeutic areas. Proximal Medical has enough resources to manage any project regardless its size or difficulty. Actually, these numbers speak better than me. We always simulate the site and key opinion leader, primary investigator to maintain best resources for the future projects. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your attention and time. I will be glad to answer all your questions. Please forward them to me. Also, there is my contact links, email and phone number. If you have any questions, then you can contact me and I put you in touch with right person in our company regarding your question. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
I
Maxim,
guess I need
for
to
your
be,
productive presentation. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I will request the audience to ask any question about his presentation in the QA session, and Maxim, you can answer them there. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Our next presenter for today's conference is Martin Tedder, who is working as a head of MDM business partner at Boehringer Ingelheim. He will be exploring on 7 policies around data. Hello, Martin, can you hear me?
Hello, everybody. I
Hello?
can hear you. I can
Yes,
hear you
how are you,
perfectly
Martin?
well. I'm fine, thank you. How are
Okay,
you?
I'm fine too. Thank you so much. So Martin, let's get started. Kindly please share your screen.
I have shared my screen.
But we can't see it here. Could you please refresh it?
Yeah, I'll try it again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can see it now.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, you can start now.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, thank you, everybody, regardless of where you are. I'm a data guy, and I've recently joined the pharmaceutical industry, and I think it's a great combination. And I would like to share with you a data perspective in this area. But first, of course, just to know which company I'm working for. I'm working for Boehringer Ingelheim, one of the world's top 20 pharma companies. Yeah, and we have actually, even in our human pharma research, we have about 100 clinical and preclinical trials ongoing in various different areas, including COVID-19, which will become a bit more in future, I guess. As you know, we are not into development of vaccines, but we are pretty much in focusing on the treatment of this area, particularly with our strengths in treatment of respiratory diseases. And actually a lot in the pipeline, more than 40 preclinical development projects are expected now to deliver more than 15 new phase 1 starts very, very soon. Yeah, and this is what I'm going to go through with you today. A couple of statements that I have heard directly and indirectly very frequently, and a few of my thoughts that I would like to share with you. The first one is the assumption that each department can handle its data on its own and can optimize its handling of data and its data on its own. And the analogy that comes to my mind when I see that is a glass filled on one side only, right? And you don't need to know too much about physics to understand that this is not how it works with water, and this is not how it works with data either. Data really, really flows across. So this is what it actually looks like, right? It just goes across all departmental organizations. And that is why organizations need a corporate perspective on data. But what does the reality look like very often? You know, you see it's fragmented by business function. Marketing does something, sales does something, research does something, and they often do it independently of each other. Or you have global companies that are fragmented by geographic entity, and great things that happen in Asia are not visible to their colleagues in America. Or even worse, everything about data is left to IT because I think IT doesn't knows it all, and the business functions are not part of the discussion. Or you have global data functions sitting in their ivory tower, but not really covering everything, because the more global functions you build, the more you see the tendency that business functions feel neglected and do something on their own. A typical example, and this one is really from my experience over the last couple of years, is the customer. And you can imagine who owns it. Sales says, yes, I'm owning the customer. That's my baby. I'm going to go to the customer, talk to him and get the customer on board and so on. And then customer service says, yeah, but we are permanently interacting with the customer. It's not a once-off relationship. It's a permanent dialogue. So it should be ours. And marketing says, no, we have the big picture. All our customers are part of our pipeline and we are addressing them all at once. We need to know everything about them. And then finance says, and guess what? Who's going to ask the customer to pay the bills? And that's us. And so we are far more important for the company in regards to customers than all of you. And finally, IT comes into play and say, all your customer information is in our databases. So it's actually us, right? So you see, for such a simple thing as a customer, you have multiple stakeholders, and obviously it doesn't make sense for each of them to maintain their own customer repository, their customer perspective, customer information, and so on. So in order to get this all addressed properly, you need systematic collaboration. And different departments should reach out. They shouldn't wait for somebody from the top to encourage collaboration. It's your own benefit to go out, ask other departments what they know, ask a data department if it exists to ensure that the collaboration works. Business ownership. Very often people think, oh yeah, that's IT. They take care of it. But no, if it's your data, if you're interested in the data is part of your daily life, and everybody in the company needs to take ownership from a content perspective, not from a database perspective or technical perspective, but from a content perspective. And the area of change processes. Data changes, the world around us changes, everything is subject to permanent change, and we need to be able to manage that systematically. All in all, look at the rule of optimization. The best data approach for the entire company. So if you put it all together, that is what the owner of a company would do, right? Which is best for the company. Will always be better than if each of the corners of the company locally optimizes the way they deal with data. Because it's all connected together. My second fallacy, the data topic competes with other topics for priority. Yeah, I recall people saying, oh, data, that's interesting. Let's do it once we have covered all our other obligations or once my other projects are done, right? Which is a certain perspective that says, okay, data is not something next to other topics. It is part of each and every topic. And let's have a look at a few examples. Digitalization. This is impossible without data, which you can probably imagine, right? That we know somebody and can greet that person and know everything and have the information at our fingertips. Decision-making, right? How do we decide which projects go to the market quickest? We need the data about the project to no longer rely on our gut feeling alone. If you think of process automation, it's where everybody talks about processes that where computers replace error-prone manual intervention. In order to do so, they need proper data. Any production and logistics process depends on data, because if you have the best vaccine produced and you put a wrong label on a box, it will go in the wrong direction and it can be really, really dangerous. Understanding your business partners. You know a lot about doctors, you know a lot about patients, but would you find out if a doctor is also a patient at the same time? And of course, clinical trials, so many topics that can only work with data, particularly if you want to know whether something is really effective or whether it is just a statistical accident. Look at a typical clinical trial process as we all know it, right? And look at look at a few of these elements and where data plays a role. You know, the preclinical activities often based on databases with millions of substances, and today we can even calculate the probability of a substance to be effective or not. Biomarker research doesn't work without proper data management. Then look into the first phase of a clinical trial, you know, and you observe adverse events. Is that caused by the substance, or is it just a correlation, or is it just totally uncorrelated? Yeah, you need data and data management activities. And then whenever you submit something to the FDA or equivalent, you will have to submit huge data volumes. A nice application letter would not do, right? And you have to measure all the effects that you register, and it's huge volume. And when it goes into phase 3 or even later, you have millions of data points and their interdependencies to be considered. You have to compare, the FDA doesn't say, oh, it looks good, it doesn't look good. It really has criteria to compare the data against before they approve or disapprove. And then you have to consider data privacy, whether it's GDPR in Europe or any other equivalent regulation somewhere on Earth. And finally, after the trial is done and everything is settled, many companies, including Boehringer Ingelheim, want to share the data, and there are great platforms where you can even download raw data, and it's a lot of data again. My third point, people think that if they have to adhere to standards, imposed from the top, they become really, really inflexible. They cannot play around with the data as they used to do, right? But standards are there for a reason. And I'll just pick out just one example that I have come across, right? You see, you have an IT nerd and you have a doctor, and they talk to each other, right? And the IT guy says APIs are indispensable, and the doctor happily agrees we cannot succeed with good APIs. And then they jointly agree to do the best to promote good APIs. But what they think is, they're thinking of different things, because from an IT perspective, API stands for Application Programming Interface, whereas a doctor would probably think of active pharmaceutical ingredients. So you can talk to each other for hours without talking about the same things. And if you don't have proper data standards, you wouldn't even realize, right? And do you really lose local freedom? No, you would foster collaboration because you can talk the same language and avoid those misunderstandings. And a typical misunderstanding is if the dose is given in gram versus pounds, or that is something that is not only ugly, but it's really dangerous if it leads to wrong medication. You can improve time to market. You don't need to align first because you're already on the same basis, and that makes it easier to talk about things between different departments. Data exchange becomes easy because you don't need to question the different formats, the different meaning of the fields, because it's all well defined. And that allows for, particularly in big companies, for the different organizational parts to exchange ideas more easily, and then local ideas may have a great global impact. The typical example of standards is, if you talk about good old aspirin, right? And that is known under various different terms and formulas. And if you have it documented, then you know that you're talking about the same things. But if not, how on earth should you know? In good companies, data gets self-organized, right? Yeah, we have a good culture, so don't bother about managing data explicitly from the top or from elsewhere. It will happen automatically, right? And let's be honest, which of the following things have you seen happen in your organization? One team happily accepts a set of definitions of another team so that it's easier, or that a country organization says, yeah, I have my own master data, but I think globally applicable master data is more important, or that the laboratory decides to no longer work on their own cozy Excel sheets just in order to switch to a central data repository, or a medical team asking for a company-wide introduction of a new data attribute while they are urgently needing it. Production and research to agree to use the same data sources, although they are working on totally different subjects. I have not seen any of this happen, because that's not the nature of people. People search for their local best and try to fix problems quickly. So don't hope for an organization to develop an efficient and global management of data on its own. It will not happen. And of course, you have so many different stakeholders that have different interests, different priorities, are measured against different things, different achievements. How can you expect all of them to be automatically on the same side? No, it's really like this. Companies are different from anthills, right? Where you're always surprised how well they get organized without a law book. It doesn't work for companies. People need guidance so that they know what's the best. They need rules so that they are made to adhere. And they need the motivation to do so, because otherwise they might find ways to undermine those attempts. Data needs to be actively governed. And how would we do that? How would we find the right balance? Should data be managed centrally, or should it be managed by everybody across the company? And the answer is clearly it's none of these extremes. Don't think black and white, either one ivory tower manages it all or we don't manage it. You would want to centralize where it makes sense and leave the rest to the field. Right? And that is a principle that you may have heard in politics, subsidiarity, the principle that a central authority should have a subsidiary function only, so that they do the task centrally, which cannot be performed locally. You know, for example, one central data dictionary, because locally you would develop hundreds. This is the right criteria to set up a central data authority as well, right? And that is resulting in the needs to govern data centrally, to communicate intensely so that people understand it, and equip the teams well. Otherwise, they will not buy in because it doesn't fulfill their needs. Fallacy number 5, for data to create value, we should focus on analytics. Right? Many people think data equals analytics, and that's where we all start. And admittedly, analytics is an important aspect. If you remember the first presentation of today, that was really using data to predict how quickly you find people for a clinical trial. Very, very important. But it's not everything. Right? Look at the typical life cycle of data. First, you have to manage the data sources. Where does the data come from that you use? Is it external, internal? Is it measured data? Is it data that you have acquired? All of that needs to be managed. And then it has to be validated. You don't want bad data to come into your system so that you can rely on it. You have to classify so that it gets structured and you can compare it and you can put it into relationship with each other. You have to manage the data quality. Even data that was good yesterday may be bad tomorrow because the underlying reality changes permanently. Data housekeeping is important so that you don't pile up your data unnecessarily and just keeping private data too long makes you violate GDPR and other privacy regulations. And finally, after those many steps, you come to use the data, right? And look at the entire cycle here. And what happens if you only focus on analytics? You are left with a small fragment of it. And then we have to ask the question, who takes care of the steps that happen before? If nobody takes care of the steps before, what's the probability that the last step produces proper results? And just as an analogy, right, skipping all the preparatory work before using data is really similar to skipping clinical trials before selling drugs as products. It's dangerous and it will result in a disaster. So what are typical issues? Just to run through a few quite quickly, that you have an idea of what might go wrong. Data might be missing. You might have data duplicates, so that if you count them together, you just come to wrong results. And different spelling, a computer thinks it's different because a computer makes a string comparison. Wrong data, sometimes it's simply wrong. Sometimes it's just not linked to each other, right? So you have information about one certain customer in different systems, and nobody has all the data when talking to that customer. Sometimes data is correct but scrambled, right? Particularly if it's based on data that was entered into screens by human beings who just got it wrong. You have different data languages. Imagine how many ways of defining revenue you could imagine. Is it the internal revenue as well, only the external? Is it when does the revenue apply? Is it when you sell something or when you receive the money? All of these things need to be defined properly. Different data formats, right? Imagine how many ways you have to just store temperature alone, that you have it in Celsius or Fahrenheit and with a decimal point or not. And, all of that needs to be mappable, that you can compare different things. Sometimes you have simply outdated data that used to be correct years ago or even weeks ago, and now it is wrong. So data needs to be taken care of permanently. Hidden data. Imagine you have a GDPR case where somebody says, oh, I want you to delete all of my data. Will your organization be able to find all places where a certain customer's data is stored? And then wrong hierarchies. How does it all belong together? You have everything in place about your substances, about your products, about your brands, but are you sure that it's the hierarchy, how it all belongs together, is maintained consistently across your organization? So it's really, really important to ensure we have the steps before using the data in focus. Number 6, data decisions are fact-based decisions. Oh yeah, and you hear that very often, right? Gut feeling is irrational and data is facts. Just, very often you have the data there, you have the algorithms there, and you have the software there, right? But let's have a look at it as a typical description of a description on how to use your data, right? And this is about ANOVA, which is a way of testing data and evaluating data, where a book says this test can only use, and if you flick through this, it's really it sounds like a very precise description so that you ensure that if you follow all of this, the results will be reliable because they are fact-based. Right? And now have a look at some of the expressions used here. Must contain more than 30 observations. What if it's 29? Is there a big difference between 29 or 31? One is invalid, the other is valid. Normally distributed. No process ever is normally distributed. You can only come more or less close to it. Question is, how close do you have to come to it for these assumptions here to be valid? Must be comparable variances across groups. What does comparable mean? That's again left to humans to say, this sounds comparable, this is not, right? And then the second part, look at 3 times the word should. Should sounds like optional. Yeah, so you're not forced to, but it's recommended. What happens to the validity of the results if you don't follow that friendly recommendation, right? And finally, you know, it says, don't bother, we have a computer software that does it all. Would you really want to rely on somebody else's computer software to do it all right? How do you know whether that algorithm in that software matches the preconditions of your data? So in reality, data decisions are not fact-based decisions. No matter how good the algorithms are, human factor plays a very, very big role. Finally, people think data is part of IT. That's where it belongs, because IT maintains all the computer systems where the data is stored in, right? If that is the case, then you know, you would have to have clinical trials become part of IT, because IT runs all the systems where the data is stored. Obviously, that doesn't really make sense. And if you look at history, 200 years ago, right, you had a lot of ideas how to work with data, but technology was far behind, right? People were still waiting for technology to catch up, right? Halfway through last century, technology had more or less caught up. You had the first strong computers by those standards back then, and you could use your applications. And meanwhile, technology is ahead, and you know, we are waiting for the good applications to come. So it's not a matter of IT anymore to build anything. It is a matter of business folks to make sense, to use that, right? Whether it's big data or blockchain, or, you know, as we at Boehringer Ingelheim do, use quantum computing now to find out about promising substances in out of millions and millions of substances. So we have to resist the temptation to ask the IT folks first, because they tend to come with a solution desperately searching for the problem. And we need to come with the problems first and then see what does technology have on offer. You know, this is the traditional way of working, right? You have a solution landscape that was provided by IT, and then IT led the determination of needs, asked some of the business teams, and then IT did the final configuration. And you see here, it's 95% dark blue, so no surprise that the solutions often don't meet the business requirements. The more modern way of doing it is that the business teams start understanding the business needs, and really to get into you know, the root causes. Not my business need is I want a window here and a functionality there, but what is the underlying ability that I'm lacking? What does not work properly or efficiently? And then start from there. And IT will have a consulting role here. They will have to tell people what is possible and what the options are, but not more than that. And then business folks would determine the overall business vision and targets. What do we want to to achieve within the next 2 years? Where do we want to stand? What are our capabilities supposed to be? And finally, that's where then IT comes in and actually creates the solutions. And then they will configure it accordingly. That was my 7 fallacies of data, and you can understand that my absolute conviction is that data really deserves attention. It's not that ugly detail that's in the background and that will help turn this into something that works by some nerdy experts. No, data is in the center of everything. And I wish that you take this message home with you, that when you discuss these things in your companies, that without explicit data management, the rest will have a hard time to succeed. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Well, Martin, it was an informative presentation. I personally enjoyed very much. Thank you so much for your time and your effort. I will request the audience to ask any question about his presentation in the QA session, and Martin, you can answer them there. Thank you so much. Moving forward, our next presenter for today's conference is Valentina Weska, who is working as a CEO at Vela Clinical Trials. Her topic is changing games with the decentralized clinical trials. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Valentina.
Yes, I hear you. Can
How
you
are
hear
you?
me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fine, thank
How are
you.
you?
Fine, thank you. How
So,
are you?
are you fully prepared for your presentation?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. I will start
Please.
now with sharing my screen.
Yeah, sure. Please share your screen.
So,
Okay, perfect. You can start the presentation, Valentina. Thank you so
you
much.
see my screen now. Okay. So, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Vela Clinical Trials presentation at this conference. I'm pleased to be here today, and I want to thank you for your time to be with me here while I will be discussing on the current game-changing situation in the clinical trials industry due to increased use of the decentralized clinical trials. My name is Valentina Jovanovska, and I'm the founder and CEO of Vela Clinical Trials. Having spent my career in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry as well, also by working directly with the patients and together with medical, pharmaceutical, and other professionals, I was able to detail understand what are the needs by all of those stakeholders. With this extended experience and the background as a nurse practitioner as well as a biologist focused on molecular biology, and also with my keen interest in innovation, I founded Vela Clinical Trials in 2013, and since then, the company serves as a pioneer for home trial support services in the Mid-Europe region. As an expert in understanding and overcoming the challenges with the regulatory and practical elements of successfully running a DCT, Vela Clinical Trials supports the clinical research industry while maintaining a global network of partners and medical professionals. Having supported all phases of clinical trials with no limitation to therapeutic area or age groups, Vela CT offers convenient and reliable services for creating a more patient-centric clinical research. With the vision to contribute for the development and implementation of new therapies, for maintaining and improving the people's health, the way of delivering effective and high-quality decentralized clinical trial services is the only one that Vela CT follows. So the decentralized clinical trial is basically nothing new. But with the current pandemic situation, it came more visible. It also came to be an approved model for improving the clinical trials by conducting some elements elsewhere than at the clinic. I will be presenting some real DCT experiences, as well as give you a strong value proposition and also a view for the future. The landscape of clinical trials is changing now more than ever before. Companies have been continuously looking to accelerate the drug launches to the market, and patients are awaiting those launches as they need urgent help for their conditions. In 2016, a paper published by the Applied Clinical Trial says, imagine it's 2025. Participating in a clinical trial does not require travel to a clinical research facility or doctor's office. Your mobile device, maybe phone, watch, or even glasses, is your link to the clinical research study and how you report general information and adverse events. The study personnel visit you at home for drug administration and follow-up. We are now quite close to 2025 and to this vision. It must be said that 2020 was a highly productive year for the clinical trials industry, as the technology is constantly improving, and the past year its use was due to COVID-19 skyrocketed. 2020 was announced as a year of telehealth. The industry saw sustainable innovations. Some were streamlining of clinical operations while enhancing the patient's experience due to technology's use. And accordingly, the key focus shifted to the artificial intelligence, but mainly on the patient centricity. By having a closer look on how we carry out the clinical trials, we have to admit that the framework in this industry is not a patient-friendly one. The protocols that we are developing, as well as the regulations, are highly complex. This does not match with the patient's real life and their journey at all. Usually, study participating patients will be asked to do a number of visits, much more visits than they would normally be doing while having a standard treatment for their diseases. And this is time-consuming. We have to consider that also patients have busy lives. They have jobs that might be limiting them to sacrifice precious time only to participate in a possibly life-saving or life-changing study. By assuming that people would put on and risk their financial security only to participate in a study is absolutely unfair. Expecting to travel for a visit to the trial site and accordingly spending hours there waiting is creating barriers with a consequence of low recruitment and high dropout rates. It is not only that low rates of referred patients impacts the recruitment and enrollment. There are other limiting factors that must be taken into consideration. For example, the socioeconomic status is an important one, as well as the cultural background or race or gender. All those are creating huge barriers for numerous potential patients. And it is well known that the patient recruitment and compliance are crucial for the study success. But luckily, by proactively thinking and adaptation of new processes, we are moving a step forward. The use of technology in this industry is nothing new, but it offers numerous advantages that have a direct impact on the patient recruitment and retention, as well as on their engagement and diversity. Reducing the inconvenience of traveling to the sites while collecting data by using various devices increases the patient retention. Yet the way of so much collected data that is in reality not necessarily needed creates inefficiencies and is time consuming as well. This makes the study more complex and elevates the costs. The topic of data quality must be also considered here. It still remains as a major concern the low literacy of technology use, especially by the elderly population. And having virtually based sites with possibly one centrally based PI creates within the same population the feeling of lack of care. This is a momentum, and this will in some time expire, as we have the generation of millennials with quite opposite lifestyle and understanding. The use of technology will definitely increase in the future. The digitalization continues to provide an impetus to moving away from centralization into direction of virtual and patient-centric model. It becomes already critical to understand how we deliver the healthcare in general. The large group of millennials is also coming as potential clinical trial participants, but they do not have interest in the traditional model. The pandemic has shown us that currently there is a better way to assess and to deliver healthcare, but also to conduct the clinical trials. Executing clinical trials by using the technology and mobile and local healthcare providers creates the highly efficient model of decentralized clinical trial. But decentralizing the clinical trial does not mean that 100% of the study can be decentralized. On-site visits are still needed, but it has to be determined which are the key visits that must run at the site and which one can be relocated to the patient's home. Respective to data, it has to be determined how the data at which time and which way should be captured. This is a decentralized clinical trial with a hybrid approach. Considering the opportunity of relocating a part of the visits from the study site to the patient's home or at alternate place would give the patient a choice to participate into the trial. Digitalization lowers the barriers so more patients can participate in the trial. Data collection can be secured, timelines would be shortened, and the delivery to the market will be accelerated. So let me give you here an example of what does DCT in reality means. It concerns a phase 2 study. For the life-changing therapy, a hybrid approach was per protocol determined from the very beginning of the study. A home-based training for the patients provided by a home trial support service personnel prior treatment start was the first step. A weekly safety visit during the treatment period were implemented, as well as 24/7 on-call support for technical and any other issues and questions. In progress of the study, the weekly visits per protocol were reduced to monthly safety visits. In the late 2018, the study faced unexpected and serious issues that requested a study stop or a serious adaptation of the study protocol. So obviously the second option was chosen, as the patients were already long-term participants and basically the study was and is a successful one. So this followed in increasing the safety visits to 3 times per week. So the safety issue was pretty good managed. One of the patient's residence is in a rural area high in the Alps at 1200 meters of height, a lovely view from terrace here. Everything went good until the hard winter with a lot of snow hit in January 2019. Nothing unusual for the region, but for the study logistic a tremendous challenge. After weeks of snowing, only a heavy four-wheel drive vehicle was able to reach the place. The direct-to-patient was suddenly an issue instead of solution. Data collection was at risk too, as the technology-based communication had a low stability. The nurses that were locally based faced also difficulties in reaching the patient. The study was once again at high risk, but this challenge was successfully solved only by the nurses themselves, as they have already created a very strong relationship with the patient and the family. All nurses were still visiting the patient during the winter period on a regular basis. They were walking for hours to the patient's home only to let this patient receive the life-changing therapy without any interruption or risk. Direct patient delivery was also carried out by the nurses for about 2 months. They supported the logistic of the IMP and the ancillaries. The patient and the study haven't seen any interruption. All procedures and visits were per protocol performed. The data flow was not interrupted at any time, as the nurses were able to master that challenge too. Using the hybrid model of DCT shows how we can implement the solutions at any time, even at occurring of unpredicted challenges. The limitations in geographical reach or the diversity of the population can be easily overcome while considering the hybrid DCT approach. A close interaction between the patient and the medical personnel creates a relationship with the patient and enables an equal dialogue with him. Offering a support not only by technology, but bringing the study to the patient's home or working place instead of traveling to the site all the time empowers the patient to participate into the study. Lowering the burden and offering a possible new effective treatment for health issue is what all of us need. And all of us are potential patients. All of us deserve the best possible health care, so we better contribute to create such one. We better let the focus stay on us as humans, as patients. Decentralized clinical trial is really nothing new, but it is still represented only by the minority of clinical research projects. During the pandemic, throughout the rapid spread of the virus and the resulting lockdowns, not that the local health risk has become a global risk, but we saw disruptions in the traditional clinical trials in all parts of the world. So it became obvious that all players in this industry were forced to adapt to the new situation. COVID-19 has simply catalyzed the adoption of the DCT as a model that varies from the traditional one. A global Informa Connect survey from May 2020 shows that the decentralized clinical trials model is still only in the minority of the clinical research represented. Only a quarter of the ongoing clinical trials feature DCT components. Still, the immediate effect of COVID is largely spurring the increase of DCT adoption. A clear consensus emerges that COVID-19 is necessitating acceleration of DCTs. 76% indicates that this pandemic is leading to increased use of decentralized clinical trials model among their workload. A bit later, by November 2020, according to Tufts University, already over 55% of the ongoing studies have transitioned to remote and virtual execution models. During the pandemic, the DCT model has minimized the virus transmission risk and therefore increased the convenience of the patients, while offering lower costs and faster access to the data for the sponsors. As the pandemic increased the utilization of DCT model, the long-term impact is an inflection point, creating a lasting change in the trials processes. The momentum to greater technology adoption and patient focus will continue in the future. And this is basically the evolution way of the clinical trials industry. The long-term benefit realized by conducting selected visits at the patient's home or at alternate site, such as working place or school or some other place, is making the study participation more convenient, reduces the burden, and increases the patient engagement. As the travel burden is reduced, patients have no longer the need of often traveling to the sites, so the geographical area is extended and the diversity is increased. The increased recruitment and retention of the patients also enhances the site experience, which automatically leads to speeding the timelines and improving the efficiencies. The pandemic has also shown how resilient the decentralized clinical trial is and how it can ensure the study continuity, and all these resulting in improved data quality and overall management. A close collaboration by all stakeholders make the hybrid approach of the DCT as a robust one. Considering that not all procedures must be provided by the trial sites, the perspective changes, especially the one for the patients. Numerous services such as IMP administration by almost all methods, intravenous, intramuscular, and so on, or collection of biological samples, or various assessments, for example, ECG or spirometry, etc., can be relocated. Basically, for all procedures when a presence of a medical doctor or robust medical devices are not needed, they can be relocated from the clinic. Trainings and education on devices and procedures for the patients and their caregivers, they are much more efficient when executed in their preferred setting, such as at home. Having the chance to interact with someone they are familiar with not only reduces additional difficulties during the ongoing study, but also supports the site staff so they can better perform the entire study project. So the most important thing is to remember that the patient-centric delivery is a huge value to the patients and their caregivers, as they appreciate the convenience, the flexibility, and the comfort of participating in the study from their own homes. The benefit for the investigators is seen by the ability to recruit and retain their patients, to obtain more patients from broader geographic areas, while this ensures the ethnic and geographic diversity. This enables them to enroll patients without loss of the expected revenue. Shortening the timelines is the sponsor's benefit, while the consumer's advantage of getting access to their therapy sooner is the most valuable one. So I will close here, and I hope you've enjoyed this. I would like to invite you to submit your questions in the chat box, and I will be also happy to hear your thoughts on these too. You can share them in the chat or better email me directly, or you can reach via LinkedIn. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Valentina, for your mind-blowing presentation. We are delightful to have you with us on today's conference. I will request the audience to ask any question regarding her presentation in the QA session, and Valentina, you can answer them there. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next presenter, who is Netline Wilson, who is working as a Business Development Manager at NIHR. She is going to present on decentralized trials in the UK. Hi, Netline, can you listen me? Hello.
Perfect. I've just unmuted. Perfect. Thank you.
Hi,
It was just
how are
waiting
you?
for the host to unmute.
Hi, Netline, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay,
And
so
how are you?
I'm fine too, thank you. So are you prepared for your presentation?
Yes, thank you. I'm hoping that you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Perfect.
So
I'll
let's get
just-
started. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So good day, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity for speaking to you today to give the UK's experience of delivering decentralised clinical trials. So I work for the National Institute for Health Research, and I've been with the organisation a number of years, over 10 years, and before that I was a clinical academic in the oncology space. So first off, I'd just like to give you a little background to the National Institute for Health Research. We're funded by the Department of Health and Social Care, and our purpose is to improve the health and the wealth of the nation through research. And the way that we do this is by funding, supporting, and delivering high quality research. And within the NIHR, the patients and participants obviously are a core and important at every step of our sort of clinical pathway. And this also includes the participants, carers, and the public. We obviously want to have the best researchers there are to conduct these clinical trials. And so it's really important for us to provide training and support for those researchers. We also invest quite heavily in the infrastructure to deliver those clinical trials. And as I mentioned around the best researchers, we also need to ensure that we've got well-skilled workforce so that we are able to deliver those clinical trials, which will lead to improved treatments and services. We also partner with a very wide range of stakeholders, so charities and industry, as well as public funders, to ensure that we're maximising the value of our clinical research. So the NIHR, we're a rather large family, and we have one of the world's most integrated health research data systems, or health research systems. And so we work from both from bench to bedside. So in the early phase part of our infrastructure, you can see there on the left-hand side, we have the biomedical research centres, clinical research facilities, experimental cancer medicine centres, and our mix, the medtech and in vitro diagnostic cooperatives. So that's the infrastructure that's in place for the early phase clinical research. And as we move into the later phase of the clinical development pathway, there in the red, you can see the NIHR Clinical Research Network. And that's the part of the organisation that I work for. So we're all about the delivery of the clinical research trials. So the government gives us just over 500 million per year. And of that, about 300 million comes into the clinical research network in order to provide the support for conducting clinical trials, and that's both academic and commercial research. So as I mentioned, the Clinical Research Network, well, our aim is to enable and embed research into our day-to-day lives, therefore improving the healthcare. And we have a number of policies and strategic documents that talk about ensuring that we're embedding clinical research into our day-to-day practice. So from the Clinical Research Network, we're one national network, but we break ourselves down into 15 local clinical research networks. So you can see there, they're based across the whole of England. And that allows us to have a flexible deployment of resources and staff. And within those regions, we also have our 30 therapeutic areas, our 30 indications, just so that we're ensuring that the breadth of indications are covered. And so there's a representative from each of those specialties within each of those 15 locations. So that means we've got a huge pool of resource of key opinion leaders, our research active clinicians across England that we can call upon for our early engagement and feasibility services. And of course, they have a very detailed understanding of our care pathways. So the map there is just showing England, but we also have very close links with the rest of the UK and work very closely with the devolved nations, so Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So I just want to give you an idea of the sort of volume of research that we support within the Clinical Research Network. Now for financial year 2018-2019, I'd sort of describe it as our last sort of normal year. We had just over 2,000 new studies come onto our portfolio, and of those about 740 were commercial studies. At any one time, we have between 5,000 and 6,000 studies that are open and requiring support on our portfolio, and approximately a quarter of those are commercial. You'll see the recruitment figures there, so 870,000 participants recruited into those clinical trials, and of those, about 46,000 were into commercial research. Now, the Clinical Research Network was established in 2006, and since that time, we have signed CDAs with over 1,000 independent organisations. And so these are across a wide range of pharma, biotech, imaging. About 70% of the research is submitted through CROs, so we're very actively involved with CROs. And then we had the year of the pandemic, so the year of COVID-19. So the UK set up an urgent public health response group in response to COVID. You can see there that we've supported 18 vaccine studies, and there's been just over 100 COVID-related studies approved for support within the NIHR, and that is from many hundreds of applications that we received. And within those studies, as of yesterday, there were just over 1 million participants that have been recruited into all of those studies. So a huge effort to get participants into not only the vaccine studies, but other treatment and prevention studies over the last 13 months. And so what is that support that I've been mentioning that the Clinical Research Network does? Well, we call this our study support service. And I'm just going to go through just the first sort of 1 to 3 on this wheel that you can see here. So 1 and 2 are around our early contact and engagement and our early feedback service. So we really encourage companies to come to us early, you know, maybe have that initial conversation with the key opinion leader about, okay, I've got this research idea. Do you think it's going to be feasible in the UK and fit with clinical practice? So it really is personalised to what you as a company, as a sponsor, are wanting to achieve from your clinical trial. And then when you're a bit further down the line, you know, you've got your draft protocol or perhaps your a synopsis. This is when the formal part of the service is our early feedback service. So we go out to one of those, a number of those key opinion leaders that I'd mentioned, and they can help with protocol development, but also it's about an assessment about the feasibility and compatibility of your protocol within the UK environment. And so with doing this early feedback, we're wanting to ensure that, you know, that the protocol is fit for purpose, and that will help ensure that you're meeting the recruitment time and target. Now, the services that we provide are free of charge. So the next one service that we have is our site identification service, and that's exactly as what it says on the tin. It's about identifying sites for you across the whole of England, but we also, as I mentioned, have links into the devolved nations. So this is via a single submission. It's an online submission, a bit like registering for an Amazon account. You register your company, and then that enables you to complete a short 2-page form about what you're looking for from sites. And so that goes out across those whole 15 regions that I'd mentioned in a previous slide. And it includes your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And on the basis of that, a site will express an interest in taking part in the study. And if a site does so, then it's up to the sponsor or the CRO running that study to further those feasibility discussions. So those are just a few of the services that I wanted to mention, but we also continue to support with the setup of the study and an overview of performance management. So what about decentralized trials? Well, as you've seen from the previous slides, we have the networks and the support and the infrastructure in place to ensure that we can support those clinical trials. And as we know, trials come in all different shapes and sizes. So now we're looking to see how we can support those decentralized trials. And this morning, you would have heard from Vladimir and his slides that, and also from Valentina mentioned it, about the patient recruitment and retention, and this being one of the biggest challenges that we face within conducting clinical trials. So we hope that decentralized trials are a way of addressing that challenge. So, as I mentioned previously, participants are at the core of everything that we do. And so what can a decentralized trial offer us? Well, they enable us to broaden our outreach, to offer more people the opportunity to participate in research, and therefore improving the health and wealth of the nation, which is the NIHR's mission statement. So we hope to see an increase in the number of people participating in research, but also an increase in the diversity, as well as a better retention rate into these studies. So there's a number of focus on the innovation in clinical trials, And this has been seen in the 2020 EMA Regulatory Science document, which talks about recommendations in order to foster innovation in clinical trials and promote the use of high quality real-world data in decision making. And also within our UK's own life sciences industrial strategy, and that describes the UK as wanting to lead the way in undertaking novel and more efficient trial designs, which will help us to develop new medicines, diagnostics, and medical devices for clinical trials and for patients. So our decentralized clinical project was initiated last year, just before the UK went into lockdown. So there's been a few delays in the decentralized clinical trials project itself. However, we've had some invaluable information and data come about from some trials that converted to virtual trials, decentralized trials, which I'll mention in a moment. So the objectives of the project were to establish what the key challenges and strengths are in delivering such trials in the UK. It's also to keep abreast of the evolving trends and to develop the capacity to deliver such trials within the CRN's portfolio. We've identified a number of companies that are obviously already working in this space and what they need from us within the UK. We've also, so when the COVID hit, this is one of the pilot of decentralized trials. This is one of the parts that was able to capitalize on the situation that we found ourselves in and being able to deliver decentralized trials. And so we've been able to learn a number of lessons from that. So what we already know is that within the NIHR, we have strength in our data systems. We have linked up data. And this allows us to find sites and to find participants. And we have a number of various registries and excellent partnerships with charities, which has enabled us to use these patients' registries to invite participation in the decentralized trials. An excellent example of this, of course, has been the COVID vaccine registry. And when that first opened, we had 100,000 participants or interested people register for that registry within a month. And now we find that there is over 300,000 people registered. And so of those 18 vaccine trials that I've mentioned, all of those trials are using the vaccine registry to aid their recruitment. So in terms of our data, at the core of our data system, we have our reference data service, and that's a core system for providing all the metadata. And sitting around that, we have our central portfolio management system. And so that's what you feed into when you make your submission into the clinical research network, looking for support. So that's all the core key information around your study. And then at a local level, so that's out in those 15 local clinical research networks that I mentioned, they have their local portfolio management system. And all of these data systems feed into our open data platform, which we're able to interrogate to look at performance monitoring, but also to help aid us with what we have a research targeting tool. So we're able to look at prevalence and incidence data and where research active sites are and where participation in clinical trials is happening. So that enables us to marry the sites to the clinical trials. We've also been able to demonstrate that we're able to recruit at scale, and this is via our patient recruitment centres. And I'll tell you a little bit more about a partnership with the patient recruitment centres shortly. We also have fantastic relationships and partnerships with our industry and CRO partners. Within the NIHR, we also, the patient and public involvement engagement is very important to us, and one of our services is actually the patient engagement and clinical development service, and that's where we work with sponsors and patient groups to ensure that the protocol and documentation and schedule events, etc., that that's fit for purpose for the participant. And we also, of course, have a fantastic flexible workforce, which has recently received some extra funding to enable us to have that flexible, agile workforce, which will, of course, be key for us in delivering decentralized trials. Now, to date, we have, within our clinical trials, we have lots of data around trials that have used e-consent, remote monitoring, and of course, we have just delivered our first fully virtual irritable bowel syndrome diarrhea trial, which I will share some information about. So the Irritable Bowel Syndrome Diarrhea study, that was the largest IBS trial in England, testing the efficacy of the drug Enrollment. And prior to COVID, the study was run over 28 sites in England, and that included GPs, hospitals, and private clinics. And in that 70-week period where the trial had first opened prior to the pandemic, they had managed to recruit 224 participants into those 28 sites. So it used, obviously, traditional method, the bricks and mortar sites. And then once the pandemic hit, they had to convert to a different way of being able to continue the trial. So the trial became fully virtual. And so they used e-consent, electronic data capture, and online eligibility screening. And the IMP for the study, that was posted to the participant's home. The participant had a number of video call appointments, and they were also asked to keep a daily diary. So this conversion to being a fully virtual interventional clinical trial represents a major step forward in the UK's capacity and capability to conduct decentralized trials. And this new decentralized approach, which was developed by the team in conjunction with the patient recruitment centres, was able to extend the reach of this trial to participants across the whole of the UK. So not only did we have the sites in England, but it was able to extend to participants in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. And as people were able to participate in the trial from their own homes. And the researchers were able to demonstrate how a virtual decentralized approach can make clinical research more accessible for patients. And this was evidenced by participants enrolling in the study from as far away as Penzance. And so that is in the very bottom southwest tip of England, a considerable distance away from those original 28 bricks and mortar sites. So the virtual expansion of the trial resulted in rapid recruitment and randomization of patients, with the 50th participant being randomized just 2 months after the study converted to being a virtual trial. So this means that the virtual version of the trial significantly outperformed the site-based version of the trial, with a single site recruiting 67% faster than the 28 sites that were using the traditional approach. So this study is the UK's first virtual trial for IBS patients and one of the UK's first virtual trials of an interventional therapy. So this has shown that the virtual trial capacity is able to empower the patients. It allows any patient anywhere in the country to access the trial. It also meant 0 hospital visits, which makes participation safer and, of course, easier for all. And for researchers and the life sciences industry, the virtual approach meant that there was an increase in patient reach and also that they can reliably answer the research question, which ultimately leads to an improvement in treatments and care. The second study that I want to highlight is the PD-STAT trial. Now, the Parkinson's disease trial investigated the effectiveness of a common cholesterol-lowering statin, simvastatin, as a disease-modifying treatment for Parkinson's disease. Now, the trial opened quite some time ago, back in 2016, and the main recruitment was between 2016 and 2018, and this was across 23 sites. Now, there was a 26-month follow-up to this study. And of course, due to the nature of Parkinson's disease, this meant patient retention into the study was very challenging, but also retention onto the study was crucial for its success. And so then when in March last year, when the pandemic reached the UK and majority of hospital visits stopped, then the study team really had to consider what their alternative is. And so of course, that was converting to a virtual trial. And so the study team gained regulatory approval to switch to this virtual approach. And this allowed the study team to complete assessments via video consultations. The trial concluded just a couple of months later, so you can appreciate the importance. They were extremely close to the finish of the trial, and the virtual approach enabled them to complete this trial. And although the trial found that simvastatin holds no promise as a neuroprotective treatment for Parkinson's disease, what it did do was generate robust data and best practice processes, which we have now analysed and implemented for future use in research. This trial was also an exemplar of innovation and remote research delivery and demonstrated the UK's agile response to delivering research during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the UK response to the COVID-19 pandemic has really exemplified what can be achieved within the UK in terms of delivering clinical research. Our cross-organisational, decentralised approach is quite unique and has been made possible by our single National Health Service, our NHS, and the NIHR research infrastructure that's embedded within it. We now have the opportunity to build upon that and ensure that we develop clinical research that becomes truly embedded in our clinical care pathways. And of course, it gives us a new way of delivering research, which will benefit teams, patients, and sponsors. So will not only our workforce be flexible and adaptable, but so will our clinical trials. As Valentina mentioned, COVID-19 has definitely been the catalyst for decentralised clinical trials, and as such, we are seeing more and more sponsors approaching us to conduct decentralized clinical trials in the UK. Many thanks for listening, and I'm of course happy to answer any Q&A questions in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Natalie. We really enjoy your presentation. Audience, you can ask questions regarding her presentation in the Q&A session, and Natalie, you can answer them there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to our second last presenter for today's conference is Denise Stackel, who is working as a head of clinical collaboration management at Genentech. She will be putting lights on the case study in working with collaborators. Hello, Denise, can you listen to me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you, Denise?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine too, thank you. So are you ready for your presentation?
Yes, I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah, please share your screen. Okay, perfect.
I'm going to see if I can make it.
Okay,
right.
That's perfect. Okay, you can start your presentation.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're seated in this world today. I'm going to take a little bit of time to just share with you clinical collaboration, the why and how insights into successfully managing combination studies. So here's the agenda, high level. So I'm going to just first talk about why we do combination trials with collaborators. I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the combination studies because it was a bit of a journey. What is the industry clinical collaboration, which is what we've kind of gained on this journey, the scope of what the group does, key factors and success in collaborator work, and then advantages, challenges, and lessons learned on this journey to date. So why do we do combination studies or trials? So we want to identify safe and effective combination therapies. We want to support cross-indication learnings and identify combinations for priority development. We want to identify molecule and a mechanism of action that will work in combination with one of our molecules. And then, just to be clear, we want to say that the collaborator molecules are used in combination studies to generate signal-seeking data across a wide scope of combination studies. So we're using a collaborator product, drug, it could be an IMP or it could be a commercial drug, in combination with one of the Roche Genentech molecules. And again, that could be an IMP or it could be a commercial drug. So the evolution of combination or collaborator studies, in 2017, we created a formal working group to support a grassroots effort. So for years, we were doing these combination studies, but we didn't have a formal team to manage the process. And within months of forming that team, we had several types of questions come into the group, which were, do you only do cancer immunotherapy? Because at the time, we were solely focused on atezolizumab, which is a CIT drug. The question was, who should I speak with to manage other collaborations for non-CIT molecules? And then could you help us implement a collaboration study? So these questions came in really fast and furious. And as a team, first off, the collaboration process we have works for any molecule, which is great. So we could really support anybody that came through with a combination study that wanted to explore that. So with the evolution of all these questions, it brought on a larger discussion to talk about how do we do this at a global level? Because at the time when we started this, it was really happening in South San Francisco in a very small dedicated group, the group I'm telling you about, and it was happening as well in Basel in different groups. And so ultimately, we did a sprint session and we decided to put a dedicated group together, and it would be a global group to work on all collaboration studies within the Genentech Roche network. So with that, we did a mapping of all our stakeholders and business generating groups. So there's a lot of different organizations within Genentech and Roche that want to do combination studies with external collaborators. So we need to be able to understand who those business generating groups are so we can work with them very closely. We did a review and a standardization of the tasks to be supported by the team. So managing these clinical collaborations means you're managing the collaborator and helping them understand the information that's needed in situations where we're providing drugs and they're running the study, they're doing the combination study, or where we're receiving the drug and we're doing the combination study. Again, as a reminder, these are not always commercial products. So when they're IMPs, there's a bit more work that needs to be done to bring that product in to be able to label it and release it into our own studies. We also, at the time when we made this decision to put this global group together, was to rebrand it to be called the Industry Clinical Collaboration Group. A little, hopefully the name is a little clearer on what we do. This group is made up of 2 different organizations working together. So we work cross-organizationally, which is a bit interesting and different because it's a bit new within the Genentech Roche organization. And then the team sits in Canada, Switzerland, and the United States. So Mississauga, Canada, Basel, Switzerland, and the San Francisco Bay Area in the United States. So we are truly a global group working cross-functionally. So what is industry clinical collaboration? So generally speaking, high level, we foster relationships with external pharma companies, and we negotiate and execute clinical collaborations, combining our products with their assets to advance science and investigate new therapeutic options for patients. That was the most succinct way we could kind of put our cause out there, so the elevator speech, if you will. And basically, the group fosters relationships. That's both internally and externally, and we work on the partnerships with our different collaborators. So I really look at this role as about relationship management. So you might ask, well, what's in scope versus what's out of scope? So in scope, Roche partners with company X for the supply of a Roche product. So we call those gives, or the supply of the company product. We call those receives, to run one or several clinical studies. So if company X is the sponsor, we call this a non-Roche involvement clinical trial. These trials can be from phase 1 to phase 3, and we work very closely internally with our alliance management group in partnering for the execution of the studies where they are not in licensing. If they're in licensing agreements, then our alliance management group takes the lead. We manage the collaboration study portion. So just to say what's out of scope is commercial supply delivered to other pharma companies, working with CROs, wholesalers, and international pharmacies. This also does not include the work that we do with IIS or IST studies. So this is a very specific scope of the work we do. So you might be thinking, well, what are the key factors in collaborator work? And there's many. This is a very short list. One of the things we found extremely important for the success is a consistent approach for all collaborator activities. So what that means is we have implementation of the necessary contracts. So there's a master agreement, a supply agreement, a quality agreement, sometimes a QP agreement, depending on the relationship and the product, and then a safety data exchange agreement. And those are all set up and in place prior to any product moving between the two companies. Once the contracts are in place, that's kind of the upfront work that needs to happen. Really, then the routine work starts to happen for the duration of the study. So this relationship isn't just where you set the contract up and kind of walk away from it. The relationship is throughout the duration of the study. So if this is a 5-year study, this is a 5-year relationship that we that we take on and manage. So study startup and maintenance. So we work with the supply plan, the resupply activities and timing. So that's really important. That's very dependent on your how well your study is enrolling and moving along. Transfer of materials, that is extremely important to understand, especially when we're receiving product, because if there's been any change in the manufacture of the product, we need to understand that from a regulatory standpoint. If there's any manufacturing location changes from the product, that's very important as well, and other regulatory changes. So every time we either receive or provide material, we need to make sure that what we're giving or receiving can be used in the clinical studies that we're working with in the country. So if they've made any changes at all, those have to be understood so that the findings can be updated. And then this relationship goes through study closeout. So through the final study report, the final financial reconciliation, if there's financial cost sharing in there, document closeout, and all publications. So this is a long journey. This is not a 6-month process. This can be anywhere from 2 to 5+ years, depending on the size of the study. So other key success factors are that we have a dedicated team member for the initial collaboration introduction, and that person stays with the collaborator the entire study. So it's one person, one face to the company within the team here. There are routine meetings. So there's standard meetings that probably happen monthly just to check in and make sure supply situations are on track and nothing has changed dramatically, either where we may need to receive or provide more product, or that we may want to push out a delivery because maybe the enrollment isn't going as fast. We have standardized agendas just to keep the talking points consistent and that our internal stakeholders understand what we're talking about in each meeting as well as the collaborator. We have a clear escalation process when events occur that cannot be resolved at the local level. So this could be supply concerns or issues, production changes or challenges, and regulatory challenges. These are really important pieces because oftentimes we are cross-referencing the collaborators' filing so that we can do so that we can sponsor the study, and vice versa. So I want to just talk about some advantages, challenges, and lessons learned on our journey to date, because there's been plenty of them. Every day, I think you learn something in this role, and you need to be able to take that forward. So the advantages that I want to share with you is this dedicated global group to support all the collaborator work is really extremely helpful and really helps clarify the work that needs to be done. And for our internal stakeholders, it makes it very easy to understand who you need to talk to and work with if you want to do a combination study. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They have this group that they can just come to, put their recommendation in, and then we will work with them to ferret out how we could best work with the company that they want to work with. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have a dedicated lead to manage each collaborator. So that is very important so that the collaborator has one point of contact they can work with routinely. It doesn't mean that the lead has to facilitate every discussion, but the lead is the person that the collaborator can go immediately to for any question. That lead is also going to make sure that when there's regulatory discussions that need to happen, they're going to pull the right people together to get in that meeting to have the regulatory discussion or the quality discussion or the supply discussion. Any of those discussions, we're going to make sure that that lead is making those connections with the right people internally and in the collaborator space. And then we have a lot of standard work processes to support the collaborator work. So this allows for a standard approach with the collaborator and our internal stakeholders. So we're not constantly asking for different pieces of information in a different format. It doesn't mean that the collaborator provides this information in the exact format we ask for. It's a bit of a guide. So it allows the collaborator to give us what we need. Sometimes it comes exactly as we've laid out in our standard template. Other times it comes a little bit different, but the content of the information we need is always there. And then the other thing that we found to work really well is we have dedicated subject matter experts internally. So we have people from the legal organization that we work with very specifically, so they understand our work very, very well. Our quality contacts, we work with select quality people internally, both in the qualified person, QP, responsible person, RP, and our QA group, quality assurance group, so that we're very consistent in how they're thinking about the work we're doing, and that we don't have to explain or re-explain the work we do every time we chat with somebody within one of those organizations. And that goes for all of our subject matter experts. Regulatory is in there as well. So some of the challenges, I think, is really important to recognize and honor and talk about here. So some of the challenges are there's many internal stakeholders with different expectations. So we do a lot of expectation setting and really working to make sure that if something different comes up or the expectation has changed from what we're used to, that we really seek to understand why. Because there's just different perspectives here. And so we always want to just make sure that we're on the same plane or the same discussion point when we're working with our internal stakeholders. The other thing that's a challenge is we need to clarify routinely what's different between what the ICC team does versus other partner or CDMO clinical manufacturing operations, right? These are not partners. We don't co-develop the drug with them. They're not making the drug for us. This is a collaboration where we're taking the collaborator drug and using it in combination in our study. So we need to make sure that our internal stakeholders understand that difference, because it is very different from true partner work or working with a contract manufacturer. The other thing is many collaborators support with different approaches and systems. So we work with a lot of collaborators. None of them do the work the same way or the exact same way Roche does, and that makes sense. They're different companies, so we have to be very open to understanding how they do their work so that we can work well together, and that we need to be able to also share how we do our work to make sure that it's really clear of what we're asking and why. Regulatory impacting changes is something that we need to always be thoughtful about. Again, I've mentioned this a couple times, that when we're receiving product, oftentimes we're cross-referencing a filing from the collaborator regarding their product. So we need to make sure if they've made any changes to that regulatory filing, we understand those changes so that we can update our filing. So it's very, very important. Oftentimes when the teams meet, generally speaking on a monthly basis, we lead with, have there been any regulatory impacting changes? And if they say, well, no, we don't think there were regulatory impacting, we still go through what the changes are, just to make sure that we haven't missed anything. And supply issues can be a challenge. And I don't mean just in the sense of being able to manufacture, but we could also have supply issues in the sense where maybe the study is enrolling much quicker than we thought, and we need more product. So we have to be able to have that open discussion with the collaborator, or vice versa, when we're providing drug, to say we need more and this is why, and how can that happen? So these are very important conversations, because they go to the health of the clinical study, and then they also go to the health of the relationship of the collaboration. So when you can have those good open conversations, it really allows the relationship to grow and continue to put it at the forefront of being a win-win for both organizations. Because remember, we're doing this exchange of drug in exchange of data. So it's either we give drug and they provide us the data from the study, or we receive drug and we provide the company with the study data. So on to the lessons learned, which, like I said earlier, every day is a day of a lesson here. So it's ever evolving. Lesson learned, our internal stakeholders think of partners in many different ways. We always have to be clear on what the function of the group is. We have to be clear, and open communication is really critical from the start of the collaborator studies. We just need to be transparent with why we're doing things and how we want to do them so that everybody is on the same page. Every collaborator is different. I can't stress that enough. They just are. It makes perfect sense, but it's easier said than kind of sometimes understood. It's critical to understand criteria for materials going into the EU with the Brexit impact. So we're still on that learning journey, I guess, to be perfectly transparent about that. Then the dedicated group will be engaging different topics. So the ICC, the leads, they are going to be facilitating or involved in discussions about tax code, the regulatory filing requirements, operations, your qualified person, your responsible person, your QA requirements, both internally and externally, alliance management, clinical operations, IB management. IB management is just its own world. Final study closeout, routine reporting expectations, and legal expectations. And this is just a short list of activities that the ICCL leads get to participate in with each and every collaborator. So not just one collaborator, because they manage more than one collaborator, and there can be more than one study with every collaborator. So this lead role is very exciting. To me, it's like a big puzzle that you get to work on every day with multiple collaborators that you get to work with. So with that, that is all I have for this presentation. I hope you found it valuable. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Denise, for your stimulating presentation, and thank you for your valuable contribution. We hope you can join us again. I will ask the audience to ask any question regarding her presentation in the QA session, and Denise, you can answer them there. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
So moving on to our last presenter, but not the least, Tanya Sinoj, who is working as a Director of Health Operation at GS1. Here we have her presentation. Hi, Tanya.
Yes, hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
But we welcome you to the 5th Annual Clinical Trial Summit 2021, and you can start your presentation by sharing your screen.
Okay, just bear with me for a moment. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen. It seems that the host is sharing the screen, but I need to share mine. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Hi.
Yeah?
I
Can you
can't
see
hear
my
you.
screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Perfect. You can start the presentation.
So, hi everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I had actually prepared a recording just because I have a situation here that my little girl may wake up in the middle of this, and I do apologize if there is any background noise, but it seems there was some problem with sharing the audio in the Zoom meeting. So I'll do my very, very best to do a good presentation for you today. My job is to talk to you about the role of global standards in the clinical trial supply chain. My name is Tanya Sneok. I'm the Director Healthcare Operations for GS1 Global Office. Now, many of you may not know who GS1 is. We're a not-for-profit standards organisation. Our job is to administer the standards that are used to communicate about the things that move through the supply chain. So, for example, if you go to the supermarket and you pick up a product and you look at the barcode on that product, that will be a barcode created to GS1 standards. It will be a number. There will be a number in that barcode that is also created to GS1 standards. So these standards that we administer are used in more than 20 industries across the world. And it's not just about the numbers and the barcodes, but we also administer standards for identification, for data sharing about the products or the items that move through the supply chain. So traceability information, business critical information, and product master data. Now in healthcare, in the commercial healthcare environment, our standards are used across a range of applications. You see them used to meet regulatory requirements in more than 50 countries around the world. You see them used for identification of medicines and medical devices, medical consumables as well. You see, for example, the COVID-19 vaccines that are being produced carry GS1 barcodes on their secondary packaging, and in fact, some of them carry GS1 barcodes on their vials as well. So the GS1 standards are used significantly across the commercial healthcare environment. And as a result of seeing that activity, stakeholders from the clinical trials environment came to GS1 and really wanted to understand how could we apply, or how could they apply GS1 standards in the clinical trial supply chain in the same way that those standards, or to the same benefit that those standards are being applied in the commercial environment. And that's why I'm here to talk to you today, because I've had a project that's very close to my heart that I've been working on for the last number of years around developing the GS1 standards as they apply to clinical trials. Now, we all know about coronavirus, the pandemic that's shaping our lives. I live in Melbourne in Australia, and we've just had some restrictions reimposed on us because we have an outbreak of cases that has come from hotel quarantine. But one thing, and the coronavirus pandemic has done many terrible, terrible things, but one thing that it has done that I think is positive is educated people about the importance of clinical trials. And this slide here is just me as a novice Googling to find out about clinical trials. And this is the kind of information that comes up to me. And if you read through the article, it educates about the different phases in a trial, and it educates about what happens in those different phases. So that's pretty excellent information that's out there. The public has a a whole new awareness. In fact, everybody has a whole new awareness of why clinical trials are so important. So then that makes this project that I've been working on with industry for the last number of years also extra important, because I think we really have an opportunity to enable global standards across the clinical environment to make that environment even more effective, even more accurate, and even more efficient. And that's really what the standards are about. So all clinical trials have a supply chain. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. You all on this call, in this meeting, know about clinical trial supply chain much more than me, because you live this in your daily lives. Now, I've got a very simplified diagram on this slide showing the manufacturer, the sponsor, obviously the packaging site, the clinical site, and right to the patient. But the statement that's on the bottom of this slide here, rather, this is what I want to emphasize, and this is important context for the presentation I'm giving. So effective supply chains require both accurate information communication as well as accurate and timely physical goods movement. And again, this is not something that's new to any of you. It's something that's very, very logical, but it's something where the GS1 standards can help to play a role in both effective and accurate in both accurate information communication and accurate and timely physical goods movement. So let's focus on those two aspects separately. First of all, I'm going to pick the last one, the physical goods. So how are physical goods managed today in the clinical trial environment? This is what I'm told. The majority of the time it's done manually. And this is just an example of a consignment request where it's manual checking off against a list. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it is a manual process, and that means that there is opportunity to do things differently. And that's where the GS1 standards come in. Same as this example on this slide here. So this is an inventory log at a trial site. And again, you can see the inventory is being recorded manually. And in fact, expired stock is being noted on this particular inventory management log. So why is this happening? Why is there use of manual processes in a good proportion, not every site, but in a good proportion of environments for clinical trials? And I should note, what I showed you on those last couple of slides was from a clinical trial site that I've spent some time with distributors in a clinical trial environment, and many of those also tell me that they work on a manual process as well. Now, let's think about the physical goods movement and why that manual process occurs. On this slide, this illustrates, essentially in these pictures, it illustrates why. First of all, if you have a look at these pictures, you've got some products with no barcodes. You've got some products with a single barcode, one product in the middle there with 3 barcodes, and another one on the right-hand side there with a single barcode. Now, first of all, if there's no barcode, you can't scan it. So you have no opportunity to be able to scan the barcode and then record what's happening to that physical product. Is it being dispatched? Is it being received? Is it being put into inventory? Is it being counted for inventory? Is it being dispensed to the patient? Is it being administered to the patient? So no barcode, there's no ability to scan that barcode and capture the action rather than manual record keeping. If you look at the products with multiple barcodes, or the product with multiple barcodes, which barcode do you scan? If I'm a healthcare provider or I'm someone in a distribution center, how do I pick from the 3? And then for all the barcodes on this page, they're all internal barcodes. So they're barcodes that have been applied internally by a particular organization for their use. As soon as those barcodes, that packaging leaves that environment, the barcode itself and the number within the barcode don't mean anything to anybody else. So what that means is those numbers and those barcodes are not built to a standard. And because they're not built to a standard, they don't mean anything outside of the 4 walls of the organization where the labels have been applied. And in fact, what's even more risky is if I'm using an internal number on my product and my investigational product, and somebody else is using an internal number on their investigational product, because we're not doing this to a standard, we could potentially even duplicate, and that becomes even riskier particularly if distribution centers or trial sites are trying to leverage these barcodes, these internal barcodes for their own inventory management. So one of the reasons that things are done manually is because there isn't this consistently global identifier and barcode that can be used. There's also very necessary overlabeling of commercial drugs that come into the clinical trial environment. That's completely fine. That's absolutely what needs to happen. But you have a look at this package and where is the barcode? So again, we have the situation where these commercial products are coming into a clinical trial environment being very validly overlabeled, but with those overlabels, there's nothing being provided to enable physical tracking of those goods. It's all in human readable. And of course, I understand I'm here talking to you about barcodes. And I understand that, that investigational products have small labels in a lot of cases. There's a lot of information that by legislation needs to go onto those labels. So how do you fit a barcode in addition to that? And that's something that, as I've worked with the industry on this project, has been discussed extensively to make sure that the solutions that have been developed meet that industry need as well. So if we had global standards, what could global standards enable? And here I'm talking about the global standards for identification and barcoding of the physical goods. What could they enable in that physical goods management process? Let me tell you about the standard first. So I said that I've been working with industry, and in a slide, this is what the standard that industry has worked with GS1 to develop says. The barcode. Now this barcode in this picture is rather big. It's normally about the size of my little fingernail. It's been blown up or enlarged on this slide so that you can see the image well. But essentially the standard says you have a single barcode called a GS1 data matrix barcode. In that barcode, you have 4 elements of data. The first is a global trade item number, which I'll talk about in a second. The second is the batch number. The third is the serial number. And the fourth is the protocol number. Now, those last 3 elements of data, everyone in this call knows much better than me about all of those and how they apply in a clinical trial environment. The global trade item number. That is the number that goes into the barcode to uniquely and unambiguously identify a trade item. In the case of clinical trials, that could be investigational product, it could be the kit, it could be components within a kit. And there are rules in the standard for how these GTINs are allocated, and I'll talk to that as well. But the key thing here is this number is globally unique. It's built to rules, and everybody up and down the supply chain knows what those rules are, how this number is formed. So when you scan that barcode, you know that it is a globally unique number. Now, the other thing, I mentioned it's a GS1 data matrix barcode. This is really important because the data matrix barcode has exactly the same parameters or rules. Just like the GTIN, the data matrix barcode has rules around the way the information goes into the barcode. So it has rules that say you structure the data in a certain way. You use trigger sequences at the start of pieces of data to tell scanners what information is coming. And because those rules are known and published, then everyone up and down the supply chain knows exactly what the rules are and how to encode and decode these barcodes. What that means is everyone can use the barcodes. They can scan the barcode, retrieve the global trade item number, the batch number, the serial number, the protocol number. They can use those barcodes through their processes, and by doing that, they can remove the need and the reliance on manual processes. So essentially what industry has worked with GS1 to do is develop a standard for identification and barcoding that can be used by every point through the supply chain. Now, I've talked about unique and unambiguous identification. I want to assure everyone on the call that the work that's been done and the standard that's been developed absolutely is applicable to blinded and unblinded trials. There's been extensive discussion about how this works. And of course, the one thing that you don't want is somebody to be able to look at the GTIN or scan the barcode in an unblinded trial. That's absolutely not the intent at all. And there's a lot of work, a lot of content in the standard about how GTINs are allocated in what circumstances GTINs would be the same across, for example, a blinded trial across placebos, comparators, and active products. So that's something please keep in mind. As I said, the GTIN is used for the identification of the investigational products, and essentially it's a key, a lookup to a database if people wanted to find and have permissions to find out more information. But it's also the link for the serial number, the protocol number, and the batch number, so that there is this link to that information that makes sure that that information is associated with the right product, essentially. There's no requirement to include expiration date within the barcodes. There was a lot of discussion about this when developing the standard, and that's simply because expiration dates can change through a trial, and that was discussed. And lastly, there's a lot of discussion around small components and kits that don't have a lot of space due to other regulatory requirements, and how application of an additional barcode and associated information would fit. So I've said there's a global standard, and this is a picture of the global standard. It doesn't look all that beautiful, let's be honest. It's a PDF document with a lot of technical information, but it's extremely practical and extremely valuable. So it talks about how to identify investigational products. How do GTINs work? Who allocates the GTINs? When do the GTINs change? So when would I change a GTIN? What would constitute significant changes to an investigational product kit or a component that would mean an identifier would change? And in fact, what kind of barcode would be used? I've talked about the GS1 data matrix. What information goes in the barcode? I've shown you that at a high level. What size the barcode should be, where it should be located. How do I put information next to the barcode or near the barcode, so if the barcode doesn't scan, there's human readable interpretation I can rely on? How do I cater for identification of components within the kit? So what if I have and I'm making this up, but what if I have a kit with 7 syringes, 1 for each day, and it's absolutely important that syringe number 1 is used Monday, syringe number 2 Tuesday? Then standard actually caters for how those components can be identified to record appropriate use of those items. I've talked about blinded trials, and there's a lot more information in this standard. Another way of thinking of the standard is it's about identification and barcoding of investigational products from the time of assembly to destruction, if necessary. So the scope of the standard includes all active products, comparators, and complete placebos. But where there are things outside of this scope, such as other products, locations, patients, caregivers, then there are existing GS1 standards. And this diagram in the bottom of the slide here gives you a good understanding of that. So basically it says in the light blue box, there's your scope. It's the investigational product kit. The investigational products will carry an investigational product label. Now, auxiliary products generally already carry a commercial label. They already generally carry a GS1 GTIN in a GS1 barcode. So often that stays in place in a clinical trial. Same with ancillary items that are subject to regulations today that mean they carry GS1 identifiers and barcodes. Logistics units, those units created for physical shipping of goods, carry an SSCC, and I'll talk about that further. And locations, global location numbers, and of course there are standards for medical staff and patient ID as well. All of those are existing standards. Now you'll notice that there's a note against the SSCC, the serial shipping container code, and the GLN saying that they'll be assessed in future work. And in fact, they have been, as we've developed standards for information sharing. You need to identify locations and you need to identify logistics units to be able to share information about them. And I'll talk about that. And so this is the information sharing part. So what about data communications? What about information sharing? There's been a lot of work by industry around the identification and barcoding. So let's talk about how information is then shared to accompany the physical goods as they're moved and can be identified with that identifier and barcode. So my slide from the start. Effective supply chains require both accurate information communication and accurate and timely physical goods movement. So information needs to move with physical goods. Information such as what is, in a commercial environment at least, what is the master data, the basic data associated with a product? What is the traceability information? What are the transactional activities that are happening, those business transactions that are happening? In a clinical trial environment, what was identified as priority by the industry was the business transactions. Now we know they're not commercial transactions. It's not like in a commercial environment or in healthcare where you have the purchase to pay cycle, but nonetheless, there are standard business transactions that happen every day in a clinical trial environment. And the information that we were given by industry was that those are happening, and they're happening often through IRTs. Sometimes they're happening outside of IRTs because IRTs are not used in a clinical trial, but they're often not, well, they're generally not in a standardized format, and they generally don't contain standardized data. So if you're an actor that's dealing with products from multiple clinical trials, you're receiving information about those multiple trials in different formats in different ways, and that makes things challenging. So what if we could standardize these business messages? What if we could standardize the content and the structure? Not the sending, because the sending would still need to happen through the appropriate IRTs or through the other systems that are used to run a clinical trial. But what if the content and the structure of those messages was consistent? So there was one way of dealing with different trials from different sponsors. And that's been the ask of industry, and that's what we've worked to develop over the last months. So the first step was to develop a business level guideline, and that was ratified in April 2021. And that talks about which messages are commonly used in the clinical trial environment, which business messages, the use cases for those messages, what you need to consider from a business perspective to implement those, generally what kind of data will be included, the business rules associated with those messages. So, one message must come before another, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, this integrates the IRT. In fact, the feedback that we received from industry is because an IRT is not used in every clinical trial, then a more general name for the IRT or the systems that are used to communicate information would be a data management entity. So you'll find in our standards reference to a DME, which is just the general name suggested. So this business level guideline is for someone like me, not a techie, but someone who wants to understand, why would I use a standardized electronic message in a clinical trial, and what messages should I use and when? Then, in fact, just last week, the detailed technical specifications, so that the implementation technical information to accompany this business guideline was released. So these are standards that detail the structure of these messages. They detail the interrelationships between the messages themselves and the fields within the messages, and cardinality, so which fields are mandatory and which fields have multiple repeats, et cetera, et cetera. There's also in this standard XML schemas. So these are essentially what the implementers, that the techies really need. So these schemas give you more information about the technical structure of the messages and are used to validate implementations to make sure that the implementations, the messages created, meet the rules. There are also sample messages created, so you can see what the end goal looks like. So this is an important part of the technical information. Now, which messages? So these are the messages that the business guideline talks about and the messages that the technical EDI XML content talks about. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the message names as advised to us by industry. In the brackets are the names as they align with the GS1 standards. So essentially what we're saying is that to meet the need of the content and structure of an inventory release file, we based that on a GS1 XML message, which is the messaging standard, a GS1 XML message for the inventory operation instruction. Now, what we did though is develop a whole suite of new messages for clinical trials, and that was what I showed you on the previous slide. So really a significant amount of work has gone into this by industry and and by GS1. Now, how were the standards developed? I just want to spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's important. It's not about how GS1 decided to develop these standards and then come to industry and say, this is a great idea, you should use it. It really is about how industry worked with GS1 and came to GS1 and asked for standards development. So over the period of the work that we've done, and if you've been looking at the timelines on the guidelines, starting in March 2019, right up until now, we've had 110 representatives from 57 clinical trial organizations working with us. And I've got to say, it's been a pleasure to work with all those representatives who've been very vocal about their needs from a GS1 standards perspective. We've had an ongoing work group chaired by Victor Dupuy, which is a hospital in France, Pfizer and Sanofi. And you can see that the actors that were involved in this spanned all the different functions across the clinical trial environment. This slide is quite old, from October 2018, but it does give you an idea of some of the organizations who have been part of this work. Obviously not all of them, because we've got 57 of them, but some of them at least. Now, before I talk to you about the benefits, I just want to talk about who's implementing and what's happening. Because you may say, I'm here talking to you about these standards, and these standards sound like a logical idea, but is industry really using them? The identification and barcoding standard was released in March 2019, and yes, it is being used by industry. There are trial sponsors today who are producing their investigational product kits and components in line with this standard. There are those who are going through implementation honestly, I would expect there will be 10 to 15 organizations who have fully implemented the identification and barcoding standard by 2022. And that's significant commitment by industry to implement a standard that is in fact voluntary. It's not a regulatory driven standard like we see in the commercial environment. For the information sharing standard that was released last week, it has been available to our work group from I guess a pilot implementation perspective since December last year, but we had to wait to go through the full ratification process of our standards, which is quite a comprehensive process. What I know is that this standard is being currently assessed by a number of organizations, those organizations who are involved in its development. It's being built into some of the major IT systems that are used for clinical trials. So the answer to the question of the EDI standard, the information sharing standard, is yes, that's being used. Now, it looks like we've finished the standards development, and we have, but I wanted also to extend an invitation because we do have an ongoing monthly work group. That work group meets for an hour and a half each month on the first Wednesday of the month, and the function of that work group is to talk about the implementation challenges, questions, issues that people come across. So how can people share across an industry to make sure that their implementations of these standards run smoothly? Now, almost the last slide. So across the board benefits, I just wanted to share with you the benefits that have been given to us by our work group. So these are benefits not that GS1 has developed, but that have been devised to us by the organizations who have worked with us to develop the standards. So they see benefits for suppliers or sponsors or contract manufacturers around data being compiled more quickly, with full supply chain traceability being enabled, fewer transcription errors on the back end. If you scan a barcode, you're less likely to make a mistake in capturing information than if you're trying to write information or record it manually. Less time spent verifying and validating data. From a trial site perspective, saving of time, improving inventory management, being able to scan those barcodes, getting knowledge of what items are coming and when through some of the messages that are being sent. Limiting the need for internal relabeling and transcription. So this is an important one because there are trial sites today that are taking investigational product and over-labeling it with their own internal barcodes. So they're over-labeling the internal barcodes of the sponsor with their own internal barcodes so they can manage their inventory. And this is because they're running multiple trials and they need to keep track of the inventory for those trials. And of course, for trial sites, if you have barcodes, then you can use them. So you can scan at the point of dispensing, you can scan at the point of administration. And benefits for patients, the addition of an element of trust. I'm not here saying that GS1 standards are the ultimate answer to making the clinical trial supply chain 1000% effective, because there is so much work that goes on from lots of different actors to make sure that your supply chains are effective and efficient. But what GS1 standards do is they provide an additional check. So scanning a barcode rather than manually writing, receiving information in a standard format electronically rather than having to interpret different types of formats or potentially different manual information versus electronic information. All of that is like a double check. It's like an extra safety gate, and that builds an element of trust. And so that's really why we believe that the standards have value and apply, and they have value and they have applicability in the clinical trial environment. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. I really do appreciate the chance to share with you something that has been very, very much a passion project for me. I've included on this slide the website to where we have our clinical trials information. Here you will find all the standards that have been developed that I've referred to throughout the presentation. We're going to have time for questions now, I think, but also if you need to contact me, my email address is simply my first name dot last name, so tanya.sneok@gs1.org, and I'd be very happy to answer any emails as well.
Well, thank you
Thanks
so
again.
much, Tanya, for your informative and enlightening presentation. You have explained so many points, which are the solid need for the hour. Thank you so much. I will request the audience to ask any question regarding her presentation in the QA session, and Tanya, you can answer them there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm just looking through. Let's have a look.
This has been a wonderful conference. I have enjoyed listening to the talks from our valued keynote speakers. It's a privilege and an honor to be entrusted with such an undertaking at a gathering of such immense people from different parts of the world. We greatly appreciate the support we have received from our sponsor partners, Willa Clinical Trials, Porswell, and Medical GR Bioresearch. Thank you so much to our estimated presenters for your valuable point of view. Now, as we have reached the end of our conference, on behalf of Platinum Global Solution, I would like to thank all the stakeholders, including speakers, sponsors, and delegates, without whom this conference would have been not possible. I extend my best wishes to all of you. Take care, stay safe. Thank you.